Live from KPRC and click2houston.com. This is a Decision 2018 Election Night Special with Khambrel Marshall.
And good evening, everybody. Good evening. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to this KPRC live election coverage and analysis. We will be here throughout the evening. There's a lot going on clearly in this community and this state right now. We've got a lot to talk about. We're going to do that, and I'm not doing it by myself. To my right is Andrew White, the former candidate for governor, who's here. Dallas Jones is here as well as a Democratic strategist. To my left, or your screen right, which is kind of the way it should be, right, Kevin? Yes. Kevin Fulton, who is a candidate for a state rep position, and also Marco Roberts, who is president of the Log Cabin Republicans and of Houston. And so thank you all for being here. Appreciate you being here. Should tell you that as we come on, we were expecting that as of 7 o'clock or so, we would have maybe the early numbers, but because of a lawsuit, things have changed a little bit. So maybe some of you have not heard about this, or you were watching the earlier live stream, but because of a lawsuit asking that several polling locations, 9 polling locations, be held open an extra hour. So these are the 9 precincts there. You see Fiesta Mart, and then the Houston CC, A-Leaf, Metcalf Elementary, Lone Star College, Cypress, Iglesia Trinidad, Hampton Inn, Evelyn Thompson Elementary, John Marshall Middle School. And the reason for that is that the several organizations have filed suit claiming that the polls were not available to people early on. And Kevin, you were at the Harris County Republican Party when all of this was going on. Talk about that a bit. Yes,
what happened is it looks like they couldn't get in the door at first, I guess, in these locations. All of them are traditional Democrat precincts. Once they got in, they couldn't use the equipment. There were problems with the equipment. So it delayed people from being able to vote early in the morning. Their fear was, they claim, is that people who came in the morning wouldn't be able to come back after work in time to vote. They filed a lawsuit. State District Court judge allowed the polls to stay open an extra hour. What happens now is those voters will vote after the polls close, but they've switched the system, and those should be provisional votes. It gives the party a chance to go to court tomorrow and ask that order be overturned, that the polls should have not been allowed to stay open that extra hour.
So is there a chance that might happen?
You know, usually when polls stay open, you never really hear about polls staying open when there's a user error. Usually there's some type of weather problem, there's some type of emergency. It's rare that you've seen courts jump in and open up election times just because of human error, especially when the party who made the error is the one asking for that additional time. It just becomes unfair to other voters and to the other party. So a lot of times judges will not jump in and extend those hours absent some type of weather emergency.
Well, it sounds like the fair thing, I guess, if you can't vote early, you should be able to vote late.
Yeah, the fair thing is to be able to vote. That's the fair thing, right? And in some of these locations, the first votes didn't happen until 7:55 in the morning. And so that means people came early. They made a plan to vote, which is what you ask people to do, make a plan to vote. And they made their plan. They got there and the doors were locked. They got there, they couldn't vote. And if you have a job, you got to be at the job at 8 o'clock, what happens then? You got to go to your job. And so I don't know if this extended hours is really going to make a huge difference or not, but it's definitely the least they could do.
Yeah. Well, we're going to see how that plays out. The provisional part was something I wasn't expecting. When you hear that the polls are staying open, you think that they're going to be counting everything and there's no...
Well, provisional gives them the right to be counted in the event that they need to be counted, but...
Right, there may be a challenge, and you want to know which votes will be challenged. Otherwise, you give the power to one judge downtown Harris County to affect the whole election.
Well, you know what? Look, I'm going to chime in, and I'm assuming we're going to play nice tonight. But the reality of it is that Stan Stanner is responsible for ensuring that we have machines that are working properly, that we have access to the ballot, and that didn't happen. I actually participated in a press conference today. I serve as first vice president of the NAACP, and our election protection lawyers have got numerous complaints around the county, not only about faulty voting machines, but about voter intimidation. We have a complaint from one voter that actually stated that they were told that they couldn't vote in the location, and the lady, after going back and forth and and wanting to cast a ballot was told in 2018 by an Anglo election worker that perhaps if I put on blackface, you would understand me better. These things have been happening all around the county. We've fielded a number of calls. There have been reports of elderly African Americans being yelled at, vote Republican, and feeling extremely intimidated at polling locations. This has happened. Well, this is reality, and it's not funny. I'm
assuming that if you want to push that narrative, great. But have you ever been a Republican and tried to vote in a traditional Democrat area? I have. I've been screamed at, I've been cursed at, I've been called all kinds of names. So don't act like this is limited to, okay, there are some problems with some precinct areas that are Republican. No, there's problems in Democrat areas. That's why both parties have lawyers set up. That's why both field calls. But to act like you walk into Sunnyside as a Republican and everybody hands you roses and welcome you into a voting booth,
that happened.
Not at all.
With all due respect, if you walked into Sunnyside, which I've been out quite a bit, if you walked into the Sunnyside polling location, I'm not sure how I would determine that you were a Republican.
Yeah, they wouldn't know.
How would they know that in order to start and scream at you unless you just went up and started yelling, "I'm a Republican"?
You know, the thing that's bothering me about this, though, and I just think that in general, and I'm sure in your news reporting, we were talking about this before about news reporting. I'm always very uncomfortable, though, when people start talking about somebody told me and I heard, and this was what's happening as some sort of fact. I think that because it's too easy for people to start saying, well, I just heard this and this story, and then start spreading it out. You know, we talk about the social media, we're spreading all kinds of reports about something that happened, and then it turns out to not to be true. So I just would like to kind of pause this. It sounds to me like what you're saying is very incendiary and definitely would motivate people. But even if, you know, there's literally hundreds, I don't know how many poll workers do we have out there throughout the county. It's an army. It's an army.
I think you missed the beginning of what I said. What I said is that I serve as the first vice president of the NAACP, and our election protection center that is armed with lawyers actually received phone calls and complaints. This is not hearsay. Well, these are actual filed complaints of incidents at polling locations. Let me chime in
because we did have a report today. We had a reporter on that incident, and they showed the poll worker who actually was cited because of her action. So the police came and they actually escorted her off and said, you got to go because several people there.
Yes, sir. These are facts.
A lot of these polling locations are in CD7, right? And so you'd hate to think that could make a difference.
CD7 for those who are...
CD7, which is Lizzie Fletcher and John Culberson's race, which could be a close race. And you'd hate to have it come down to this sort of stuff.
Well, that's exactly right. But I mean, so you're telling there was a report of one person doing something. I mean, the presentation I'm hearing already, just from the the starting line, is that we're having some massive situation occurring across Harris County.
That's correct.
I just don't think that's a fair characterization. And we start already with we're concerned in this country about the divisiveness of this country. So I like for all of us to put a pause on anything that we hear and saying, okay, well, if somebody did something wrong out of 6 million people, thousands of workers. Okay, one person did something. Let's let an investigation took place. I was, another.
Yeah, you were doing some other things. We had a reporter on that. It was that one incident, and then there's not widespread at this point that I know of, but that one got a lot of attention because of the blackface comment, which was witnessed by a number of other people there. So we'll continue to talk about that and other things, and I love the spirit of this conversation. We'll go sing several verses of Kumbaya later on, but we do have some early numbers.
The polls close.
Depends.
We have some early numbers, though, I'm told, and if we do, we can put those up and we can take a look at what there are. And this is just some from U.S. Senate numbers. This does not include any of the Harris County numbers, but this, of course, is with just a very few number of it's only 1% reporting, and of course, from that number, you have no idea where it comes from. It come from a deep blue
at this
area.
point, from what I can see, is that it's coming from Dallas, which is going to be it looks like it's coming from strong Beto locations, but it's really only a few precincts, 8 precincts out of almost 8,000. So it doesn't say a lot, but it's the start.
Well, and I've been looking at in the polls, the national polls that I've been looking at, Beto has never really been ahead in any of those polls. So if he were to come and make it a contest or win, that would be a total huge upset to me.
I recently saw Cecile Richards put a post up with a picture of her mother stating that there was never a single poll that year that stated Ann Richards would win the governorship of Texas.
Well, you are the optimist.
And if the polls were accurate, Hillary Clinton
and
was president
so she
today.
did. And Ayanna Pressley in Massachusetts would have lost. Andrew Gillum would not be the nominee, and neither would Stacey Abrams. I don't know that I have a lot of faith in polls these days.
And Hillary Clinton would have been president.
She would be president of the United
Clinton
States.
would be there today.
Yeah.
God bless the polls.
Nonetheless, I would recommend that every Democrat take a picture of that, because I don't think you'll see that for the rest of the night.
Yeah, we're lopsided right now, 59
it
to
is.
41. So that's true.
Well, our Andy Sirota is one of our reporters here, and he's monitoring the Cruz campaign, and he's live at the headquarters where the Cruz campaign is hoping to have a celebration tonight. Andy?
Khambrel, good evening. That's right. The energy and the volume level in this room here at the Hilton Post Oak Hotel is beginning to ramp up quite a bit. The doors opened here at 7 p.m. sharp, and his supporters began trickling into this ballroom. You can see them behind me here. They've gathered in front of a stage that's been set up. This is where Senator Cruz will be addressing his supporters later this evening. We understand that his father is set to give a prayer around 7:30 or 8 o'clock this evening. Jim Mattress McInville is expected to also speak here tonight. Senator Cruz was in town yesterday to energize his supporters, his voter base. He was very candid, very frank with them yesterday, letting them know, look, Democrats are going to turn out in record numbers to vote. That you can't stay home, meaning you, his supporters, cannot stay home. In fact, why don't you grab 5 of your friends and take them to the polls to vote. This race is going to be so close, closer than really anyone expected. The closest finish in decades, perhaps. It's a race that we're just not watching, but the rest of the country is watching as well. So certainly there's quite a bit of activity and energy in this room. Supporters very eager to hear from the senator later on this evening. Khambrel?
Andy, thank you very much. Of course, Senator Cruz finishing up here in Houston where he lives. And, of course, Beto O'Rourke lives in El Paso, and that's where he wrapped up his campaigning as of yesterday and voted this morning. Our Phil Archer is standing by in El Paso to bring us the latest on what's going on in O'Rourke country. Phil?
Well, Beto and his supporters are going to be here at the Southwest University ballpark, but that won't be for about another 30 minutes. I'm sure the information we're getting right now from the Secretary of State's office is some very good news for them, even though it's not definitive by any means. But O'Rourke's entire campaign has been built around driving voter participation, driving turnout, getting voters to the polls that normally don't vote, certainly in midterms, and many times at all. He talks about Texas not being a red state or a blue state, but a non-voting state. So the press of his campaign had been from the beginning for the last 22 months to get those people to the polls, especially young voters and sort of unaligned voters who were registered but just haven't been bothering to vote. And by any measure, it has been a remarkable campaign. He's refused to accept corporate money or PAC money. He still managed to outraise Ted Cruz, but to the tune of about $75 million. He's backing a progressive agenda that's actually a little to the left even of some people in his own party. And he's trying to bring hundreds of thousands of people to the polls that don't usually vote. And that appears to be, at least that there's some indication he may be doing that now. So win or lose tonight, it looks like Beto O'Rourke may have actually changed politics as usual in Texas, and who knows, maybe across the United States as well. Khambrel?
Thank you, Phil. I appreciate it. We've got a group of people here who certainly keep their eye on this. And, Kevin, I want to talk to you about that. As Phil was talking about, there's always that optimism from the Democrats about being able to turn the red state purple/blue, whatever. What do you think, and maybe for both of you guys, about Beto's campaign and what it may have done to put a chink in the red armor, if you will? Or has it?
Well, I see it as the Wendy Davis effect. If you remember, every celebrity all over the country, all this money flowed into Wendy Davis because they thought she was going to be the savior for the Democrats in Texas and was going to flip the state. Turned out it wasn't even competitive. So they get the big cities, Houston, Dallas, they get those cities, San Antonio, excited about candidates, but the candidates they put up are not Texas values. They're not even moderate Democrats. They usually go far left, which gets all the money flowing into the state. But the little towns in Texas, they drive statewide elections, and they're not looking to someone like Beto and the things that he's pushing for Texas values.
Is this the start of something different as far as the Democratic Party is concerned?
I think it absolutely is. Beto, the campaign that Beto ran is a historic campaign. Going to 254 counties, the people who showed up, at counties where, they haven't seen a Democrat in decades, right? And all of a sudden you've got 30, 40, 50 people trying to figure out who's this Beto guy. And they're asking about him. That sort of excitement, that groundswell, that's why I think this is a different year. Because this is not a normal election. I think Beto's created a movement, something bigger than just what he's standing for. People are excited for this kind of change.
Go ahead. I kind of want to add another, I think, a different element to that, because I know that maybe both parties want to read a lot into this, more than I think is really there. I think what's happening with the Cruz race is actually very unique to Cruz, and the reason is this. I think many people appreciate that in the Republican Party, there's been always a segment of the Republicans that Cruz used to be a rock star. 2014, Wednesday State Convention, he was the biggest name there, by far, bigger than Dan Patrick. But something changed in 2016, in that election with Trump. And when he showed up at that convention and made his speech, there was a small break that occurred with a section of the Republicans that supported Trump, who had never forgiven him for that. And so he's got a problem with this segment of Republicans that is very supportive of Trump, who's always stayed a little angry at him ever since that happened. That's when you started seeing his numbers, popularity drop, was right around 2016, and he never quite recovered it at that. On top of that, then you also have all these people who don't like Trump. Nothing to do with Cruz, but they don't like Trump. And they're Republicans as well. And so I think what's happening in an irony for Cruz is he's having two sets of Republicans that are dropping out on him. One of them is the ones that are angry from 2016, very strong Trump supporters who are unhappy with that speech that he made. Because we heard it immediately. I know, Kevin, we heard how that reaction was like loud when that happened. And then secondly, is now being punished from the other side of that coin, Republicans who hate Trump, who are saying, I'm not going to vote for you. And I know Republicans like that. I still think they're the minority. But when you go from, expecting 95 to 99% of the party to support you down to 85% because you've lost these numbers, that's a noticeable number. And I think that's what's happening here. So I don't know. When Beto O'Rourke got into the race, I really think that they started seeing the polls, and I don't know if they understood why there was a weakness there. But that's where Beto, or Robert O'Rourke came in. And they saw, oh, there's an opportunity, and then the money started coming in. And so one phenomenon, totally unrelated, led to a different phenomenon.
So bottom line is, it's a Trump factor. Part of it is.
Yes, it is.
Well, which is kind of like, that's kind of like overriding a lot of things, is it not?
I mean, in some ways, it almost sounds like we're painting Ted Raphael as an
that's only used as
an angel, right? And the reality of it is, I think he has created some of his own issues for himself. I mean, Ted Cruz spent more of his time campaigning for the presidency than he did looking to actually make votes that would help to support Texas values. And what we understand in a very big, diverse state, how one defines Texas values is certainly not the way that another does. And so, Ted Cruz has really created this lightning rod persona for himself. And I think when Texans really look back, I think as the country has become more divided, as the rhetoric has become more heated, I think honest, everyday people, regardless of what side of the aisle that you fall on, I think they're looking for a more congenial conversation and dialogue about how do we create a better future for our children. And I believe that the message that Congressman O'Rourke has put forth is one that we'll be surprised that people will actually cling to. I can appreciate the arrogance of the Republicans, sure. If I held on to something for over 2 decades, I would think that it would never go away. But the truth of the matter is, things do change. We saw in 2010 when the country was afraid of this thing called Obamacare, House seats and Senate seats that we should have never lost, in legislatures that we should have never lost, because the country was that frustrated. And so maybe there's a small sect of people that love what this president has done, and they love what this Congress has done. But I genuinely believe that at the very core of who we all are as Americans, that the majority is going to send an overwhelming message across this country, and I hope that the White House hears it.
Do you think, you're thinking that tonight, you think that there'll be a message of that
Absolutely.
Kind? What have you seen up to this point that indicates that might be happening?
Well, I mean, as we look at results coming in, and when we look at Florida, when we look at the closeness of the race in Georgia, if you're following what's happening right now, the Democrats have already gained a seat in the House, and the Republicans have already lost a seat in the House. And we expect that this is going to be a trend. The president has toned down his rhetoric about winning the House. He has focused his strategy on the Senate because guess what? I think they see the same polling that we as Democratic strategists look at that shows that the writing is on the wall, that, yeah, they may very well lose the House of Representatives. Now, maybe we'll say, oh, that doesn't matter. Certainly it does. It mattered when Barack Obama lost it. And so it should matter today that the country wants change. The People's House wants different governance.
What is the challenge of creating a dialogue between parties? You mentioned that about the divisiveness. I mean, everything is so, there's no mild conversation.
You got to start with moderate candidates. Right now, our primary system, creates far extreme candidates, and it's been effective. It's been effective, right? If you can win the Republican primary in Texas, then you're a shoo-in in the general election. So Texas has become a race to the right. Who can be further and further right? That's why we have people like Ken Paxton as our Attorney General. That's why we have Sid Miller as an agriculture commissioner. That's why we have Ted Cruz, in my opinion, right? So we need to, my personal opinion is when the general election voters who don't vote in the primary, when they start voting in the primary, then we'll start having the opportunity to have more moderate candidates.
Are you surprised?
Not until that happens.
Are you surprised at the number of people who actually have come out and voted, the early voting numbers, and what we expect to be the actual numbers for this midterm election cycle?
I'm surprised at the amount of people that have come out, but look, we started low to begin with. I mean, our last previous governor's races, it was already a low percentage, so we had no place else to go but up. Right. Unfortunately, I still think that enough people are not coming out to vote. I do agree, and I hope it's not an insult, but you're considered a moderate.
Yeah, not an insult.
And that's a curse word now in politics. But you were considered moderate even in the governor's race. And even in that primary, they went far to the left. So I do agree that the parties tend to go far left, far right, because the people who turn out to vote are your hardcore of those parties. The people who are more moderate, they don't get involved into the general election. And because of that, the primaries, you get far right, far left, and then you have to pick between those. And I think that's kind of what happened in your race. Yep.
Well, and just look at it as a barometer for how radical the Republican Party in Texas is today. They censured the Speaker of the House, Joe Strauss, with a 2/3 vote. The Republicans said, "You're too moderate. You're too moderate for our party." This is Joe Strauss, the #3 official in the state, a Republican, true and true. They said, "There's no room in our party for you." That's crazy.
They didn't say
that's how extreme we've gotten.
They said we are not pleased and we need to register our displeasure with some of the measures that you've taken.
And so they censured him.
And you're smiling because you like that vote.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I definitely.
Maybe we could talk offline about why.
And you know what they weren't pleased with? That he was working with Democrats.
Yeah.
They weren't pleased that he was working with Democrats. They weren't pleased that he wasn't bending to the will of an extreme
of Dan
right,
Patrick
of
and his crowd.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is how you
agenda.
build reconciliation and end division, is with that kind of terminology. I don't think so. First of all, people say, well, we need to put more moderate candidates. I'm not against more moderate candidates, but Republicans, and I know, Kevin, you're going to hear this, you're going to agree with this. We have heard that many times before, and we put up moderate candidates only to have them lose big time to what we would consider far left candidates. I mean, and Republicans talk about this all the time. They say, well, we put up McCain. You guys told us he was a great guy, that you would vote for. Well, it turns out that every Democrat that liked McCain didn't vote for him. And so,
Romney liked the Democrat better.
Well, that's exactly right. So,
right, but why put up a moderate if people say if you put up a moderate, then you'll have Democrats who may come over. But we put up moderates constantly, and the point is they didn't win. So putting up a moderate doesn't mean that you're going to get that crossover vote. It just means that we sell out some of our own values in order to put somebody up that we think is acceptable to the other party.
But John McCain recently died, and there were Democrats and Republicans alike that heralded him as a statesman, as a hero, and they liked him. I liked him. I liked Barack Obama better.
Yes, but here's
but that doesn't mean I didn't like John McCain.
Again, so the problem is
a fine American.
So the problem is going to be though that
Maverick.
you know we're going to hear that from the side is you're going to like a Republican as long as he doesn't win.
Yeah.
And that's what. So what I'm again to Khambrel's question, how do you end this divisiveness? You know, because that's really the question, right? How do you do this? And I just think the picture is more complicated than simply talking about moderation because obviously, as we know, that doesn't necessarily win. And I think the problem is a little more deeper and more complicated because we have seen, and this is verifiable, over the last 40 years, when you look at the votes in Congress, they have become more partisan on both sides. Basically, both Democrats and Republicans vote less and less and less to cross the aisle on the other side's bills. So it tells you that there's something beyond simply the candidate that's being put in front of you. And yes, it's true, as Kevin said, both parties have very strong, motivated people, and the people that are the most motivated will tend to be more ideologically strong on that. However, I do think that folks like Reagan and Bill Clinton have shown how you can bridge that gap, but it's hard to do.
Well, and of course, they had some incentive in that they had houses, Congress was opposite of what their party was, and they had to work with them. They were forced to work.
There you go.
Just kind of,
there you go. Hey, we've got some pretty interesting results coming in here. I don't know if you're seeing some of this on the website or not, but right now Beto's leading 1.1 million votes to 1.0 million votes over Ted. These are the early votes coming in. Yeah, so it says only 1% reporting. That's 1% of the precincts, but that doesn't mean it's really 1% of the vote because the early vote is a big chunk. We all know that. So right now in Dallas County, O'Rourke has 345,000 votes to Cruz's 174. That's a huge gap. But what's interesting to me is if you move to Tarrant County, a heavily Republican county, Cruz is only leading by 3,000 votes in Tarrant County right now. That says a lot. He normally should be winning by a lot more now. Now it's early, but that's in Tarrant County. That's 450,000 votes counted already. 450,000 votes. That's a lot of votes. Well, I don't know. Tarrant County is not going to produce 1 million votes.
It's very early because the same polls that are in those same precincts have Lupe Valdez only 2 points down, and we know that she's not going to finish anywhere near 2 points down.
If it's the same matchup, you're right. There's a gap there that's going to. Meanwhile, you've got Mike Collier up by 56%, something like that.
Right.
So there's some goofiness going on, and the timing of these votes, we don't know how they're all coming together, but we do know this. Looking at the numbers right now for Beto and Cruz's race, there's some strange things happening in Tarrant County.
I mean, you're talking about that it takes out into the smaller counties away from the major cities to really start seeing the real votes that are going to be in favor of Cruz as opposed to Beto, you think?
Yes, I definitely do. And look at if the elections were to end today, it looks like every Republican statewide would lose. Every Democrat right now in every one of these statewide races are ahead except for George P. Bush. Just about all the other statewide races that are losing. And we know that if that were to happen, well, we might as well rename ourselves California. But I seriously doubt if our statewide races are going to finish that way. So I just think that the early results are locations that favor Democrats.
So what I would caution is let's also remember volume, right? So sure, I can look at Pecos County where Ted Cruz is winning 62% to 36%, but we're only talking about 2,000 votes, right? So when you talk about what Andrew was saying, when you go to Tarrant County where you should be dominating, right? And we're looking at about this is almost 500,000 votes, and you're only winning by 3,000 when you should be blowing up in these huge areas. The question becomes, if there's a dominance in some of the larger counties, can these smaller counties make up in volume the percentage? It's just a question that I'm going to put out there, right? Because if you look at Fort Bend County, now we're talking about 200,000 votes. Unlike Tarrant County, where Ted Cruz is winning by 3,000, in Fort Bend County, you've got Beto O'Rourke at 54%, and you've got Ted Cruz at 44%, and we're talking about almost a 20,000 point difference. 30,000 vote difference.
But now in Fort Bend, of course, in the last election went for Hillary Clinton as well. So I mean that trend may be still continuing in
That's
play.
correct, but it is a county that is completely governed by
And Kevin, to your point, all the counties aren't, for some reason, showing up under all the candidates. So it's not quite an apples and apples situation. There's still a little apples and oranges. I'm looking at the governor's race, Tarrant County. Abbott's got 234,000 votes in Tarrant County to Valdez's 187,000. Tarrant County is showing up, but on the Attorney General race, Tarrant County has no votes counted yet on the Attorney General race. I don't understand that. I don't know how the mechanics work, but we've got an apples and oranges situation. But what I do like is this. I think there's going to be between 6 and 7 million votes cast in Texas, right? And right now we've counted, 2.5 million votes. In the Senate race, and Beto's up at 51%.
So a couple of things. Number one, my producer Daniel Extraordinaire, says that there is a graphic with some information about the governor's numbers, number one. Number two, this is for those people who really like to get into politics and political discussions. This is what I really like. I know Marco, Andrew, everybody loves that, and this is a good
game
thing.
day.
It's game day.
It's like Super Bowl.
Yeah, it's
Super Bowl. Right. So this is why this is not on TV.
Yeah.
Because viewers who want to see their television shows, they don't watch it. But you who are watching this right now, put that number back up. We didn't get to talk about that. So, but tell somebody, click2houston.com is where this live stream is. So share that, get that out there, because we're going to be doing this throughout the evening. But these numbers are a lot different. The Greg Abbott numbers, as opposed to Lupe Valdez, are not really a shock there, I'm guessing. And this is going to be a continuing trend throughout the evening, probably. And his numbers in all the polls were quite a bit higher than Lupe Valdez.
Yep.
So looking at that governor's race, I mean, that's one thing. The governor had a pretty big effect because he had a lot of money. And his money went to help other candidates across the state as well. What do you make of that in terms of what kind of impact that might have been?
Well, it was interesting to me that Governor Abbott in the primary went out and found some more extreme Republicans to run in House races, in state House races against candidates. In the primary. Against Sarah Davis's race, right? He went out and recruited Suzanne Docupul.
Okay.
And to me, it was interesting because he finds these candidates to run against the moderates in his own party, right? Meanwhile, his attorney general is criminally indicted. And he doesn't have the time to go find a candidate to run for attorney general. I mean, I don't understand that philosophy very well.
Marco, you were going to say something. Chomping at the bit over there.
I was just going to say, I mean, I know you said this repeatedly throughout the night about extreme candidates and the radical party and everything else, and it comes like every 2 or 3 minutes. It's how radical and I will just say that there's a reason why people get elected into office, and you can try to characterize that. Susanna Docupul is not an extreme person. I know her personally. Now, I just full disclosure, the organization I lead did endorse Sarah Davis, and a lot of Republicans debated on Sarah Davis. A lot of them did not think she was conservative enough. Others felt that she was right for the district. And that's one of the things that sometimes I think both parties need to learn a little more, is that you got to have a little more flexibility within your party to realize that not every district is the same, and that sometimes, a Democrat, a more moderately conservative Democrat, is a better candidate than a far left candidate. And same thing with the Republicans. Sometimes you want always a more conservative person, but maybe your district isn't right for that. But as far as so this thing about he's looking out for extreme candidates, I just reject that. I don't think they're extreme candidates. They're more conservative.
Okay, so further right. He's recruiting candidates who are further right.
They're more
of the moderate candidates who didn't march to the beat of his drum. Sarah Davis didn't line up behind Abbott on the bathroom bill, right? So he got mad. And what's he going to do? And he told her what he was going to do. He said, "I'm going to come find someone to run against you." And granted, he's a man of his word. He did that. Yeah. But he found someone who was further to the right of her. It didn't work, thankfully.
Most people don't consider Abbott, an extreme right person, right? I mean, Abbott is not extreme right.
He called a special session to pass a bathroom bill. To me, that's an extreme right move.
Well, he did because it was important to voters.
What would you describe it as?
Important to which voters?
I'm sorry, say again?
What would you describe him as?
Important to you?
I would describe Abbott as conservative. I don't consider him. If for some reason conservatives all of a sudden now the key word is extremist. Like we're all extremists
Joe Strauss is a conservative. Joe Strauss is a conservative.
Joe Strauss is a moderate.
Exactly.
He's a moderate.
He's a moderate
conservative.
Sarah Davis.
He's a moderate who had to stay in office by using Democrats. So he did what the Democrats wanted, because without the Democrats, he didn't have enough votes to stay as Speaker. So you could say that Democrats like him. I understand why you're upset. I would understand too if he was on my team. But he wasn't always for the Republican Party and what they wanted, because he needed Democrats to stay in.
And again, God forbid that he stayed in office because he worked with people from different ideological spectrums, brought them together, and what happened? The people that said he wasn't conservative enough decided that they would essentially do a political homicide on their own party, on the third most powerful position in the state, because he thought enough to actually listen to people that were not like them. And yet, from the other side of the table, we need more harmony and unity, and we are the ones that are not having a healthy dialogue.
We haven't characterized anybody on the Democrat side at all so far. As far as this bathroom bill issue, I think that's a complicated issue, and so just to kind of elucidate on that a little bit, I would point out, you asked me, is that important to me? I don't begrudge any candidate, left or right, responding to his constituents. And if the constituents say, I want you to deal with this issue, then they got to. Second thing, and I've spoken on this issue many times, that bathroom issue, although I did not support it, I'll just say I did not support it. However, it was an understandable response to something that happened here in Houston. We all know it. We heard it. We know what it was called. It was called HERO. And it was the first law of its kind that actually put a $5,000 penalty on businesses if they didn't police bathrooms according to what the left ought to say, ought to do. So when people say, well, why are Republicans caring about bathrooms? Well, that didn't start with Republicans. That started with the Democrats. That was a Democrat idea to say, you know what? We need some bathroom laws, and we need to start telling businesses, and if they don't do it the way we tell them, $5,000 fines. That has never been done before. That's not in the Civil Rights Act. And so that was a reaction. Now, was it a good reaction? No. In fact, our organization tried to say, look, this is not the way to do this. To do tit for tat is not the answer. But there was a reaction. And so I don't begrudge the governor responding. He didn't push it. I don't think he made it a big deal on his priority, and it didn't pass. So he basically said, look, I'm going to bring it up here. It's up for you guys to talk about it if you want to. I'm not going to stop you from doing it. And if it passes, it passes. It didn't. So it's actually a smart thing to do, and I think more Democrats should do this, and I think Annise Parker would have learned a lesson. What you do is you don't stop people from considering an issue, you let them vote on it.
If it passes, it passes, but it didn't, and then we're going to call another special session, and we're going to spend more taxpayer money to do that. But I'm sitting here and I'm just smiling because that's
you have a nice smile.
Amazing.
It's a nice smile.
Thank you. That is such a gross mischaracterization of what HERO was about. I was one of the consultants on that campaign, and frankly, you said that there was a $5,000 fine. This is what you just said, and we could run it back if need be, Khambrel.
Nope.
You just said a $5,000 fine if bathrooms were not properly policed the way that the left wanted them to be.
The HERO ordinance specified.
That is not accurate. What the HERO ordinance talked about was that there was a penalty if people were discriminated against in establishments, and that included restrooms. So if someone, and we honed in, and what bothered me the most about that is that we honed in on this piece and we singled out one of the most vulnerable populations with one of the highest suicide rates in our society, and we said this group, while there were so many other groups that got protections, including me as an African-American male under that law, we said this group here because why? They struggled with the fact that sometimes places would say, because you're a transgendered man or woman, you cannot use the bathroom of the place that you identify in. Not that there was any issue of what was painted of these people, of being rapists, child molesters, and this rhetoric is what was used, maybe not by you, but let's deal with the facts. It was used to demonize people that just wanted to be able to enjoy their freedoms, the same freedoms and liberties that we do.
That's a wonderful speech, except that you did not disagree with what I said, because it still stands. There was a penalty. You just reworded it differently, but bottom line is you reworded it differently, but it was still the issue, and that is, up until that time, there had never been any laws telling any businesses how you do it. Gay bars allowed people to use bathrooms however they wanted. Everybody could do it. And the other part of it is, and this is the part that I think is a tricky issue, because you talk about, a marginalized segment of the community. But It doesn't mean, though, however, that you get to say to a business owner, look, if you see a guy going into the women's restroom, you're not allowed, according to that law, to even question it. And that was in there. So basically, you disarm the manager and basically saying, I cannot stop anyone, use my discretion. And that is what people were arguing and saying, look, so you're taking my discretion in my business to run it the way I think it should be. And as far as this claim that people were being kicked out of bathrooms, I never saw an Outsmart story, the Gate magazine, anybody being kicked out of a bathroom in Houston. And there are plenty of trans people, I know some of them, and they use bathrooms every day, and no one says anything.
Well,
and there was no law necessary.
I'm smiling. Wait, I'm still smiling.
Ted Cruz is winning at this point, so we could change.
We can, but I just want to say this. I'm still smiling because you're right. I didn't disagree with you. I didn't disagree with you because, no, there wasn't a law in the books. That
so you can run the tape again.
Yeah. There wasn't a law in the books.
Again.
There wasn't a law in the books that that told people to do any of this. Meanwhile, when I tried to enter a nightclub, and it has happened, and I saw Anglo patrons going in, there was no penalty for that business for turning me and my friends around because we looked differently. And there was a lawsuit and a business shut down for that happening. So yeah, maybe there were trans people getting kicked out of bathrooms, and sure, there wasn't a penalty, but we don't make laws because they're not needed.
Race discrimination is in the Civil Rights Act. It's in there.
I'm sorry, what?
Race discrimination it's prohibited by the Civil Rights Act. So what you just described was in fact deemed illegal. That case that you mentioned, it was considered illegal.
It's Civil Rights Act.
I'll bring it back to the election. Yeah. And right now, Ted Cruz is winning. The rural counties are stepping up. The mix is changing. One observation, I don't think it matters much, but the Libertarian candidate in the Senate race has a 0.5% of the vote, but then you go to the governor's race, and the Libertarian candidate has 1.5%, and you go to the lieutenant governor race, the Libertarian candidate has 2%. You go to the attorney general race, the Libertarian candidate has almost 2.5%. And that, to me, when you vote Libertarian in that way, it's none of the above. That's the none of the above vote. It's the guy who walks in there.
Andrew, that's a whole lot more boring than what we were just
I know. But it's on topic. It's on topic.
We're talking about the election.
I appreciate that, Andrew. I do.
It's on topic.
But I like that you brought that because I do watch the Libertarian vote.
I think
because I do think it's a protest vote.
It's a protest vote.
I think the Libertarian vote a lot of times is a protest vote. I don't want this one or I don't want that one. I can't see myself voting for this one.
Yep.
And so the only other person on that ballot is the Libertarian. I've always said them and like the green vote, it's usually a protest vote.
Yeah. And the numbers we're looking at as regarded Ted Cruz and the red counties throughout the state of Texas really indicate this is all early voting numbers, right? I mean, at this point in time,
that's correct.
There's still early voting numbers, but look, there's almost 3 million votes counted right now.
Right.
So it's 1% of the precincts again, but it's the early vote number. These are
and I'm going to continue to caution us to remember, pay attention to where the votes are coming from and the volume of these counties, right? And so it's one thing to say, well, they're winning X amount of counties, but we have seen some extreme, and it's been reported, and we all can agree here. We have seen some extreme turnout.
Oh yeah.
In the largest 27 counties in our state. What does that mean? Now I can talk about Harris County and what I believe the numbers will show, and we'll wait till we get to that point.
Yep.
But the question is, what's the real effect on the volume?
And they're unidentified voters, and I think that's what why a lot of people are having problems predicting how these races are going to flow, is because there's a lot of people who voted who we had no voting history on. And so the assumption is always that they're coming out because of a candidate like Beto, but we're not sure. These are first-time voters that could be excited about a whole lot of issues, including Trump. Everybody discounts Trump as a negative, but we've seen in some states and some areas, he really drives people out to come out and vote.
But here's the point: we have 3.5 million votes counted, which is about half, right? So we got a heck of a sample size right now, and we've also got a cross section of the state. We've got rural counties and urban counties. We don't have Harris County.
That's correct.
But it's basically a virtual tie right now between Ted Cruz and Beto O'Rourke. That's going to say something. That says something right now. We're going to be in this thing late at night. Oh, yeah. This is going to be a close one. Well, and Harris County, I think, is going to be the one that pulls over the top.
For people like us, that's great. It's right all night. That'll be a good thing. By the way, breaking news. Congressman Green has been declared a winner.
Good.
over the Libertarian candidate, Phil Kurtz. And
that's a shocker.
I was worried about that.
I thought that was going to be a late night decision.
I ran into him a couple of days ago, and I told him I saw his commercial, and it looked pretty heated.
Hey, I'm going a total different direction here now. What happened with any kind of active campaign of Adrian Garcia? I'm just curious about that, only because the only commercials I saw that related to Adrian Garcia running for commissioner were spots that were run by Jack Mormon, the sitting commissioner, against Adrian Garcia.
Right. And well, let's be honest. I mean, I won't go there. Listen, Adrian ran a very active campaign, but I think he had a different route. And I think the path that he had to go, I don't know that TV was necessarily the best route to really mobilize who he needed to mobilize in that precinct. One would definitely be Hispanic voters, right? He needed an uptick in Hispanic voters in that precinct. And in order to get there, you have to kind of go to the doors. You have to use different methods in some of these communities. And I think if I were Sheriff Garcia, then I would invest my time in shoe leather and on the ground, and a lot less time in really actually moving people to the polls.
I guess I asked that question only because I never saw much from him, whether it be news conferences or any kind of opportunity to be in front of a camera, where news crews would certainly be there. As a former Harris County sheriff who ran for mayor, somebody who's still a name in the community, the news media would have been there if there was some issues to talk about.
So let me say this. This will be one of the races that we should watch closely this evening. An analysis that was done and this was done by Target Smart, a national firm, of the early vote numbers through Friday. And so that's every early voting number. And when utilizing only the partisanship scores of the people that turned out, not factoring in independents, looking at it strictly from those with scoring, from D versus R, Adrian Garcia only came up negative 0.3%. For the 41.3% of those had a Republican partisan score, and that includes all spectrums, whether they're moderate to ultra conservative. And 41% actually had a Democratic partisanship score. Then when you come back and bring in the independents, when we look at that particular race, you had a very large swath of independents that independently outnumbered the R and the D side. The question remains, where did those voters go?
Right.
So 0.3% is if we only base this is not polling, if we only base this on the previous scoring of those that voted through early voting.
Man, that's in the weeds. But it's good stuff.
That's why you have me here.
That's exactly right. You're exactly right to be able to do that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I need a chart. One thing about that race, I haven't, and I think I agree with you. In fact, I hadn't thought about that, but I haven't really seen much about him. I will say, though, the one thing that I thought was noteworthy, it was the endorsement that the Houston Chronicle made of Adrian Garcia, which I thought was the strangest thing I've ever seen. I have never seen a candidate endorsed because he's good at leading parades and cutting ribbons. I thought that was remarkable.
Is that what they said?
I'm sure that's exactly what they said.
That's almost literally, almost verbatim.
I can't believe
Would you like
surprised
me to read it?
Look it up.
I'm surprised that you're surprised at the Chronicle. Sometimes I think they don't even listen to the candidates when they come in.
Their argument was,
and they've endorsed me before. So I'm just saying that the Chronicle has endorsed me before. But I have always been hesitant to base anything on the endorsements of the Houston Chronicle. They're questionable in their endorsements.
Why? This whole.
Have you seen some of the people they endorse?
You're suggesting that they're less conservative than.
Oh, they are less. They are less conservative.
There we go.
Yes, they look for you to be. If you're a Republican, they're looking for you to be moderate to left in order for them to give you their support. I think in fairness, though, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with the Houston Chronicle having it, and every paper has its ideological bent, and that's perfectly legitimate. If people know what it is, you read I read the editorial page. I know where you're coming from. So there's nothing wrong with the Houston Chronicle favoring candidates of a particular ideological bent. But I think Kevin's absolutely right. I mean, any Republican in the city of Houston is going to know that the endorsement is going to favor people who are on the middle to the left, and that's just going to be the way it is. To their credit, they do endorse some Republicans, so I'll say that that's a good thing. Other bipartisan groups in the county say they're bipartisan, but they're 100% one party. Well, then that doesn't
it's not particularly, convincing. But yes, I don't think there's any question that the Houston leans to the left.
In full disclosure, like I said, they have endorsed me, but yes, I do think it's questionable.
So, and I know you don't have a chart in front of you, but I do have this Chronicle endorsement of Adrian Garcia. Would you like me to read it? Yeah, sure. Would you like me to read it?
Read it,
says, because it does not say we endorse him because he's good at cutting ribbons and leading parades. I'll leave that there. So we're going to deal with facts here and not alternative ones.
Let's talk about the effect that's going on in the congressional race, congressional race where John Culberson is in a very close race, actually. The polls indicated that I saw the last poll I saw last week had him up by 1 point.
Yeah, within the margin.
Right.
Within the margin. So it could go either way.
Yeah.
I think Lizzie put together one of the best campaigns we've seen in a long time. Her email strategies, her commercials, her commercials I thought were wonderful.
I've seen them.
She outraised them. She out-hustled them. She proved that she could lead a campaign, which, by the way, you can be a great candidate and be a terrible campaign leader. The blocking and tackling of hiring your team and managing your team. She proved that she could do that too. And so I'm excited to see where this turns out. We're 5 minutes away from having Harris County start counting some votes.
And look, there's some big questions we have to ask. Look, and again, we can go back and forth about the polling, but there was a national poll recently released that talked about women and their favorability of the Democratic Party at a 65% rate. And that wasn't Democratic women. That was women, likely voters. That was the universe. In this race, we have to question the impact, assuming that this poll is accurate. We have to question the impact that this will have on this race. These commercials for that, I say, of all the commercials that have been flying around, I think this race has had some good stuff coming out on both sides. But will there be an impact? Will there be a deflection from the moderate, and what role will the independents play in this role? In this way, I think Lizzie Fletcher can pull it off.
It'll be certainly an upset, but I understand that they started working on this more than a year ago, started knocking on doors, and they basically were excited about the fact that Hillary Clinton won as a presidential candidate in that group, and based upon that, they came in. And that's also where a lot of the folk have complained, because a lot of national money came in to support her in that regard. Well,
it's interesting you point that out. First of all, I agree with you. I mean, I was looking at those ads every morning, and I was going, oh, those are going to hurt. Those are good ads. Really? They're targeted to the point, so I felt, Culberson campaign had to respond. They did do a response ad, which did try to, hit some of those points. So no doubt she's got good people on her campaign, because I agree with you, they were very effective. One of the best run campaigns I've seen myself. I do think that the area, the Culberson he's done his own outreach. And he's having to deal with a changed demographic. I think that was the first Republican voting district. I mean, George Bush took that district, and things have changed a lot since then. And he's had to deal with that situation. He's also had to deal with the fact that, ironically enough, you may not believe this is true, but some Republicans don't think he's conservative enough, and they look at his voting record, and I've heard that. I have heard, again, full disclosure, our organization endorsed Culberson, and I got a lot of no's, don't do that because he's not conservative enough. But it also points to the fact that Culberson, clearly was making over the last year an outreach to different communities that were new, or that the Republican Party often doesn't do that. I think he hasn't gotten enough credit for that. It's not every day that a Republican looks for the log cabin Republicans to endorse him, and he did that, and he did also our Lincoln dinner. So he's definitely been aware that this is an issue. I think he never took it for granted. He understood a year, 2 years ago that this was going to be a harder race.
So when you said that the people were saying no, what would they say? Who would they rather? If you didn't support him, who would they wanted you to support?
Well, that was my question. I mean, I did. I said, well, what do you want me to, what would you have us do? I mean, are you saying that we should support the Democrat? And then they would say, no, I don't say that. I just don't think there were. And then they would give me the list of all the votes that they didn't like. So what I'm saying is just the way people can be emotional about these things. If they get mad at you, it may not necessarily make sense per se, but if they just perceive it that way, then again, their enthusiasm goes down a little bit.
Well, we're still seeing numbers come in. We're waiting, as you said, after 8 o'clock, we'll start to see some of those numbers come in. But you brought up a point that he sought the endorsement of the log cabin Republicans, and you gave it that. So that's just the fact that the log cabin Republicans exist is an interesting topic for me, because you're in a party that, by and large, it doesn't have a reputation for embracing gays of any sort. I mean, you go to the rallies and you see the rally and the faces of the people behind the president. When we look at those rallies, they don't look like Kevin Fulton, and they don't look like people who would say, "I'm gay." So, what brought you to the Republican Party? Why do you feel comfortable within that party because of the things that the party stands for?
You might find it surprising, but I get that question a lot.
No,
me too.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure. We all get that question a lot. And actually, if you go on social media, you'll actually see a lot of minorities and gay people actually answering that question. There's that walkaway movement. That guy did a terrific job, and I'm really summarizing the frustration that a lot of people have. One of the things that I point out is, whether you're gay or black or Hispanic, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're for bigger government. It doesn't mean that you don't support a stronger defense. There's a whole panoply of issues that unify Republicans. Now, it's been a struggle for the Republican Party. Sometimes, not always, but to focus on the core issues that unite us as Republicans. What is it that makes us Republican? And it's a battle for the heart of the party. Clearly, that's a battle that's going on. But I don't think you win that battle by staying out of it. And you're saying, well, I'm just, not everybody welcomes me, so therefore I'm not going to get involved in the debate. On the contrary, you get involved. And I will say, it hasn't been reported on much, but the Dallas Morning News did do a nice article on the fact that the log-cabin Republicans of Houston and Texas were actually able to change the platform of the Republican Party of Texas and actually took out the language that used to condemn people for being gay. You don't hear that in the news, but so when you ask me why are we involved, well, that's because that's what we do that. And it's not because we're telling people what to think. What we're saying to people is we're Republicans like you because we want smaller government. We don't want government in our business. We want to do what we, lead our lives the way we want to do it.
You're not a single issue voter.
We're not single issue voters. Thank you very much. That's exactly what it is. And a lot of gay people, and I'm sure it's black people feel the same way. I know Hispanics in my community feel the same way. Do resent this idea or this presumption that somehow we have to support the Democratic Party just because of these issues. And again, it does go to show that in all these groups, you'll see participation to help the party find its way.
Yep. So during that, we just crossed over the 4 million vote count. So Beto O'Rourke is ahead now, 50 to 48.9.
Wow.
With 4 million votes cast. We don't know what the total vote count's going to be, but we're probably
What's the percentage?
2% of the precincts, but this is massive early vote count, right? So the precincts don't matter as much.
Okay.
The early vote may represent, it actually looks like it will represent maybe as much as 2/3 of the total vote.
Absolutely.
We'll find out.
It'll be about 65% of the total.
Okay.
And so
this is a sample size that again, this is going to be a very, very close race. This is a sample. We now have the real poll.
Right. And
take all your polls that you had from before, you can throw them away. We got the poll right here.
And it's important to note, Harris County isn't closed.
That's right.
So you still have a lot of big counties that have to come through, while a lot of these smaller counties are coming in.
They're coming in.
Watch the volume.
Yeah.
And again, right now at Tarrant County, Ted Cruz has 232,000 votes to Beto's 227,000 votes. That's Tarrant County.
And you're reminded that's a Republican?
It's a heavy Republican. Of the large metropolitan areas, it's the most densely Republican, right? You're not going to get, Beto's going to win Harris County, right? He's going to win Dallas. He's definitely going to win Austin, and he's probably going to win San Antonio. So the question is how much, right? But if you can't, if Tarrant County comes in close, that says something about what Beto was able to do in Tarrant County.
75% of the state's population lives in the places you just mentioned.
Yeah.
This whole process is continuing. We've got the Harris County numbers will be coming in at about 8 o'clock. I know that, Andrew, you're going to Lizzie's party, and you said you're going to be here for the first hour. And
that's right.
So we want to honor that for you.
I appreciate that.
And we're going to let you go in a little bit. But talk about before you leave us, your political aspirations going forward.
Well, my aspiration is right here, right now. I want some Democrats to win. I want Lizzie to win. I want Beto to win. I want Todd Litton to win. There's a lot of great candidates that we need to put into place. And so after I lost the primary runoff, I've been focused on those races. Whatever the future holds, I don't know. I do know this. The issues that I came into contact with all over Texas, they changed me. They hit me at a heart level. And it could be anything from immigration to education to health care, LGBT rights. There's a wide variety of issues that are affecting our state, and we need what I believe of moderate leadership. We need people who can reach across the aisle and make real progress.
Marco, you're also going to be leaving us at this point, but I know that what is your heart saying about what you hope will evolve from the election tonight?
Well, I do hope that you know, in the results that come out of this election, that people are more reflective. I'm not sure that's going to happen, but I definitely want a Republican victory. I hope that the people can look past their animosities to tweets and things and realize what's really in their interests and focus on that. And then, of course, a wish is basically that people think maybe the way you're talking and saying that when you are talking about the issues and you're talking about Trump, focus not on Trump, but on why he won. If as a Democrat or never Trump or Republican, you're upset about Trump, the best thing you could do is understand the people that voted for him and don't insult them.
Okay. And maybe we'll start to get that moderate flow coming back together again. Thank you for your support and your participation in our stream tonight.
My pleasure.
Thank you as well, sir.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Good luck as you head on off to where you're going. Thank you for coming in. Appreciate you being here.
It's been fun.
Ryan Korsgaard is here. Ryan Korsgaard is live tonight. One of our reporters who is now, he is where Greg Abbott's headquarters is right now. And Ryan, take it away.
And we expect that the governor will be here in the next few minutes or so. We were told about 8 o'clock, and then he would speak sometime after that. A lot of people at the Brazos Hall in downtown Austin. Let me show you there is a large crowd here, about 500 people in all expected here tonight. It's not necessarily invitation only, but people did sign up so they could come here tonight. That's simply because they expected there would be so many people probably interested. I went over and was visiting with some of these folks a moment ago, and I want to bring in Beth Riley, the stepsister of the governor of the state of Texas. What is going through your mind at this point tonight?
I'm so excited for Greg. He's just a wonderful man and the perfect person for Texas.
And of course, he's from the Houston area. We are as well. To so many people, he embodies really the spirit of the state, given what he came back from and where he is today.
Yes, he did. I mean, he's got a lot of courage, and his work ethic is second to none.
What does it mean to see all these people here tonight?
It's fun. I love to see the sport, especially in Austin.
What are you hoping to see tonight?
I just want to hear what Greg has for his plans for the future, and I'm anxious.
From your family's standpoint, what does it mean to see these folks here?
Oh, it's wonderful. I mean, Greg's a big family man, and I'm sure seeing all these people here is really good.
Beth, thank you very much. I'm going to visit with your friend, too, who we visited with earlier. Why was it important for you to be here tonight?
I want to support Greg Abbott and all of his philosophies.
Describe this party.
It's great. It's great. There's a sense of community. There's some camaraderie. It's really fun to be here.
And by talking to people, I've realized there are a lot of folks who have volunteered during the campaign here. So is this a bit of a reunion from that standpoint?
Sure. Yes. Everybody works together.
What do you want to hear from the governor tonight?
Just his support of a state that truly needs some dedication and to bring everybody together again. In
your mind, what are the most important issues?
Oh my gosh, I don't know. I think the border is important to me. I also think the economy is important to me, and I think the things that he stands for will help us achieve the goals that we have as a state.
Matt, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And again, the governor is expected to make his way over here. I'm checking the clock. They had said sometime around 8 o'clock. So truly at any point tonight. At some point later, when he feels some confidence in this race, he's expected to address this audience. Again, some 500 people are here. We're told he spent the day after an exhaustive campaign across the state campaigning for Republicans. He was in the governor's mansion today calling many legislators, trying to get their constituents out to vote. So a long day, a long campaign, no matter who you are and in which race. This is the culmination tonight, and a lot of people hoping for a victory. We're live in Austin tonight. Ryan Korsgaard, KPRC, Channel 2 News. Khambrel.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate it. Lots going on throughout the state here, and we have a lot going on here as well. You may have noticed that we have a woman here on the set. That was absolutely demanded by me, the father of 2 daughters, 2 sisters, no brothers. We had to have her here. Teresa Kozmowski, former chair of the Texas Federation of GOP Women. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
What are you thinking now, this election night? What kind of mindset are you in terms of what your expectations are for this night?
My expectations are actually pretty good. I think we're going to hold on to most of our seats. We might lose a few, but we're going to get most of them, and I think Ted Cruz is still going to end up winning his race.
When you say our seats, are you talking state or you're talking about national?
Everything.
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 Okay.
I think we're still going to do really well. I think there is a Trump effect out there, and I think people are happy with the economy and they're happy with the way things going. Even if they're not crazy about his style, they like what he's doing.
So the Trump effect, from your standpoint, is a positive effect as opposed to a negative effect.
Yeah.
Jerry Bernberg, the former chair of the Democratic Party here in Harris County, your take on what the expectation is for tonight?
Sweep for Democrats. Everything we saw during the early vote, everything we see during from the mail-in ballots leads us to believe that the Democrats are going to win everything up and down the ballot in Harris County today.
Oh, okay. So I had to go ahead and kind of back up. When you say sweep, that's pretty.
All right. So I'm talking about all of the judges. I'm talking about all of the county administrative offices. I think that Ed Emmett may be in trouble tonight.
Really?
I really think that's.
Why is that? Is that because of a straight ballot, a straight vote?
Short answer is yes. That's got a lot to do with it. There were just a whole lot more Democrats who showed up in the early vote, and the mail-in ballots are relatively split, except the Democrats turn out to have the advantage there, but that's only 3,000 or 4,000 votes in the mail-in ballots. But in the early vote, we're up 54-46, and that in and of itself would be probably enough to bring Lena over the top.
So who among us is excited to see the end of straight ticket voting? Anybody?
Well, there's
anybody?
I'm very excited to see
I'm excited.
straight ticket voting.
So the odd part about that
At
is
this moment, I'm not.
not in this election cycle.
We didn't start the fire.
No, but the odd thing is when you go back and look at the prior midterm elections, the Republicans did a whole lot better on straight party voting than the Democrats did, interestingly enough. Now, this cycle, it looks like the Democrats will take advantage of that, as we have in presidential election cycles, and that will have some effect on some of the ballots.
Well,
I don't think it's going to, of course, that straight party voting we won't have in 2020 and thereafter.
Right.
So in 2020, I don't think that's going to have much of an effect because that's a presidential election year, and dynamics there are going to be different in ways that there won't be so much effect. By 2022, the demographics of Harris County have changed so significantly. Well, let me phrase it this way: my crystal ball isn't working for 2022 yet. It's not going to be under warranty by then either.
More breaking news. Governor Abbott has been declared the winner in the state of Texas. Shocking, I know.
Such big news.
Much like Congressman Green was declared the winner not long ago as well. Those are those numbers and those races that were really skewed. There was never really much of an opportunity for her going forward.
Jerry made a point, just to give you guys some real numbers of where we are here. Ed Emmett, with the early vote coming in, is at 49.47. Lena Hidalgo's at 48.72, and the Libertarian has 1.81%. So at this point, no one has crossed the 51% threshold on this. Important to note, Lena Hidalgo actually won in-person early voting, 49.51 to 48.66. Where Ed Emmett's advantage came in was he dominated in absentee ballots at a 57% in his favor to Lena's 41%. So election day is really going to play out heavily in this particular race.
This whole process going forward, as we look at the evening as we progress, and Daniel, producer extraordinaire, along with Ruben, as soon as you get any of the numbers that are in play that we can pull up, please do so, and we'll go through and we get those Harris County numbers that we've been dealing with here. We touched upon the last go round. We never touched upon Dan Crenshaw, and so I want to get some conversation about him, because here's a guy who came out of nowhere in the primary. Obviously, Kathleen Wall has spent $6 million of her own money and didn't even make the runoff. And so then there was Dan and Kevin Roberts, right? Yes. And so he wins, and he's got this first-time politician, kind of green, but What is it about him that your party embraced, and why he has such a good shot to go ahead and win this seat?
Well, for one thing, I think he was very well received because he's not an establishment Republican. He's never run before, sort of the same way Trump won his office. People are hungry for folks who will come govern without being part of the establishment, without being long-term electeds. And he's a U.S. veteran. He served this country. We know he loves this country, and that plays well, I think, for a lot of people. And he's just he's a good candidate.
Your take, Kevin?
That is my congressional district. I will tell you first, I will miss Ted Poe. I've held events in my house for him. He was an absolute fabulous congressman. I was shocked that Crenshaw made the runoff. I thought for sure it was going to be Kevin Roberts. I didn't think Crenshaw would even make the final two. But I think his campaign, I mean, it was run fabulously. I mean, the posters, his face on there, the door knocking that they did, I mean, it was absolutely fabulous. I seen my neighborhood and my community all of a sudden pop up with signs everywhere with his face on it. And I think he became sort of like a rock star, wherever he went, crowds came. And it built up this energy behind what is traditionally some boring campaigning stuff that goes on. And he excites people. When he speaks, the fact that he served, the fact that he lost his eye and then went back to serve a couple of more tours. Look, I'm a war vet. I can tell you that there's people who got injured who got out of there as soon as possible, right? He was injured severely, and he came back and served a couple more times. And I think people appreciate people who have sacrificed for the country that way.
So we have some numbers here now. These are numbers, Dan. These are Harris, obviously Harris County numbers here, which shows the numbers right now with the numbers that are percent. I see that does at 1%. Very few reporting there. But about Todd Litton, he's also someone who hasn't run before.
By the way, let me point out to viewers, when you say 1%, that's not 1% of the vote.
Right.
It's 1% of the precincts.
Sure.
The entire early vote counts as one precinct.
Right.
That's just the way it's done. So really, we're probably at about 65 to 70% of the total vote at those numbers, and that's the same with everybody who's on there. But you know, Todd isn't out of it yet. When Ted, you talked about Ted, that's also my district, by the way. You can see that I'm no spring chicken. I tried my very first lawsuit against Ted Poe back in 1972. So that's how long I've known Ted, and he was a much better trial lawyer, by the way, than he was a Congress member, which is not saying anything derogatory about his abilities.
He was a great congressman,
I should add. But there's another race that's kind of equally interesting to me, and that's the 22nd Congressional District, where Sri Karlana, right now, he won the early vote in person. If that same percentage holds today in the election day vote, he's going to knock off Pete Olson.
Well, and so this is the numbers that we have right now at this point. Now you're looking at a different slice of the numbers, but you know, Pete Olson has been there, and now Sri Kulkarni has been kind of unique in that he's gone after a wide number of people. He was campaigning in several different languages and doing a lot of door knocking and things like that, being very aggressive and trying to get out there. So
so he lost
and it's important to note this particular district covers 3 counties. So I think what Jerry is examining is what's happening in Harris County. And again, it's a volume game, right, in terms of who actually turned out in these counties. But it also encompasses parts of Brazoria. It also encompasses parts of Fort Benton, right? And so those have to factor in. And I think what we're seeing on our numbers that we have on the screen is a compilation of those 3 counties. But he did extremely well in Harris County, to Jerry's point. And if that continues to depending on what the turnout was today versus the turnout in those other counties, you could see a shift in this race.
And it's going to be tough for him in Brazoria County. Fort Bend County, he may have a shot at. Although, by the way, that's Tom DeLay's old district.
Oh, sure.
22nd.
Yeah.
I like Tom DeLay.
Congressman Olson, you like everybody who's hardcore left.
He endorsed me in my race. Tom DeLay endorsed me, so
the Velvet Hammer.
I like Tom.
The Hammer.
Governor Huckabee did too, so I like that.
So if I endorse you, you're going to like me also?
I would probably lose some votes on the Republican side because they'd wonder why you were endorsing me, but hey, I would appreciate it.
So you've been watching from a distance, as you've been watching what's been going on here. Obviously, the polls were left open until 8 o'clock. Because of the irregularities in some area. You're going to
First of all, yeah, only in 9 of the polls out of better than 700 in Harris County, but 9 of them were held open until 8 o'clock.
Right, so it's not a big number. But.
And that was because they had some difficulty in getting those polls opened and the voting machines up and running this morning. Those were places where the voters didn't get to start voting until 8 o'clock this morning or thereafter.
As you are watching the numbers, and I know you and everybody here, you're used to watching numbers, really looking at the minutia of what's going on. Which races are the most important to you that you believe your party can win and that you may be nervous about?
Well, you know, I think the Culberson Lizzie race is extremely important.
That's my district.
And I think it's important for the overall map in terms of, absolutely. I'm looking at it and it's looking good. And if this holds through today, and it goes back to what I was saying earlier, there is a reality that women, whether they are conservative in ideology, are deflecting away from the party. The polling numbers indicate, not completely,
I would disagree strongly with you.
But the polling numbers do indicate that 65% of women of likely voters in this election have stated that they are voting Democratic. I can pull the poll. I didn't make that up, right?
I'd like to see who they polled.
As I stated in the first hour, and respectfully, you weren't here. Right. My point was that I think this is going to be something that we're going to have to watch, and we'll see after when we analyze the numbers what it broke down to. But I think that's something that may or may not come into play in this particular race.
I don't think it has anything to do with this race whatsoever. Okay. And this is the race I wish they would ban TV advertising after this from now on during elections. The First Amendment, yeah, I love the First Amendment, but come on, I need to watch the weather, news, and peace every once in a while.
Hey, we're on TV here now. Come on.
Hey, you know what? I think the Supreme Court ruled that all kinds of money could come into this thing. So it was like that number happened, and so when you have more money.
That wasn't the Democrats' choice for that Supreme Court decision.
That's true.
The race that I'm keeping my eye on, and I'll explain why, is the County Commissioner's Precinct 2 race, where Adrian Garcia is there. And here's the reason why. If Garcia wins, then we're at least 2-2 with Ed Emmett, worst case scenario for Democrats. And if what we talked about earlier happens and Lena wins the county judge position, you've got a sea change in Harris County because then you've got a majority Democratic commissioner's court. You'll see some significant changes, including, by the way, voting equipment, including, of course, criminal justice issues.
And we have the early voting numbers that show Jack Mormon with a 51 to 49%. And we talked about this earlier, too, that Adrian Garcia was running a kind of a campaign that was not a TV campaign. No. I didn't see any TV ads for him. Now, when he ran for Gene Green's seat, and also when he ran for mayor, you saw television spots. But obviously, based upon those previous two opportunities to run, he decided to change the methodology to try to do it this way.
Well, you're also talking about a district. It's much more difficult to put up appropriate ads when you're talking about a small part of the county rather than.
But Jack Mormon was putting up a lot of anti-Adrian ads.
Well, Jack Mormon also had a lot more special interest money in his campaign account, having been on the county commission for some time, and they do fairly well in their fundraising because they have a lot of power. And so certainly, I'm sure Adrian Garcia would have loved to have run more TV commercials if he had the money that Jack Mormon had to spend.
And Teresa would not have liked that very much at all. So the same question to you guys in terms of the races that are out there that you are most interested in that there's a chance that your party might not.
Well, for me, I'm looking more in a national view. So I'm looking more at the Cruz-Beto race because I'm looking at the Senate. It's not looking good for the House, but I am concerned that to make sure that the Republicans control the Senate, just because, especially as a lawyer, I'm very concerned with the appointment of federal judges. I'm also concerned with additional appointments that may come up on the Supreme Court. So I am looking at more of the Senate races. So Cruz and Beto is the one that I'm really paying attention to more than anything.
Teresa?
Well, I'm watching the House and the Senate. I do think we'll keep the House, not by much, but I think we'll keep it. The Cruz race, I'm not as worried about as a lot of people are, even with those numbers coming up yet. And the reason I say that is because most of our rural counties, we don't know how they voted yet. And I think it will track much the way the presidential race did. Hillary Clinton won most of the urban areas, but the rural counties came in strongly for Trump, and that's why he won Texas, even though it was by single digits. I think we'll see the same thing happen for Ted Cruz.
But Teresa, the 50% of the vote that's in so far and that has Beto ahead does not include any from Harris County. Right. Harris County will go, frankly, pretty strongly, I think, for Beto.
City of Houston will. We don't know if outlying Harris County
And I think the other thing that we discussed earlier, and I would reiterate, right, when you start, what we saw was an extreme swell in our large urban areas in our top 27 largest counties. Extreme swell, historical, right?
I've looked at those numbers.
And so when we start to put that volume together, Kimball County had 1,500 voters in early vote. McCulloch County had 1,700 voters in early vote. Coleman County had almost 3,000 voters in early vote. And I can go on and on.
If you look at the top 30, they all came in over.
So if I may, I can go on and on and on, right? But then we're talking about some of the epicenters where you're talking about a spread. When you look at Travis County, Beto O'Rourke got 281,000 votes. Let me finish.
That's no surprise.
If I may. Compared to Ted Cruz's 86,000. That's 200,000 more votes. How many Gillespie counties and Mason counties and Concho counties does it take up to make up 200,000 votes?
It happened in the presidential election exactly that way. Hillary Clinton won the urban areas, including Travis County, which always goes blue. Always. That's no surprise. No one should ever be surprised that that's how Travis County goes.
And she won Harris County by 163,000 votes.
She won Harris County, she won Dallas County, she won the big urban areas, but yet the rural areas saved the day for President Trump. I think you're going to see a lot of that with Ted Cruz too.
Right. Well, but what Hillary Clinton didn't have was a 40% increase in unidentifiable voters, 30% of which have no voting history and have never voted before, 10% of which are new registrants. These people matter.
Sure they do.
And they're going to have an impact.
How they're all going to go.
One of the things I know that Democrats, by and large, have used that analogy to give more hope about being able to
The assumption there is that they're always Democrat voters, and we don't know that by any stretch.
Right, absolutely. And the question then becomes, when you look at Democrat, Republicans, and independents and people who haven't voted before, you have this mix, this stew of like, okay, what's going to happen here? Except that we look at the numbers.
Well, and everyone said that during the presidential campaign. Look at all these new people showing up to vote. They're going to vote Democrat, and in fact, they didn't. They voted Republican because they wanted something different. Maybe that'll happen here, but maybe it won't.
Well, when we look at the history of Harris County, let's just look at it and let's take this and put it and lay it over the state or the country or whatever the case may be. In 2006, in the midterm, 600,000 people voted in Harris County. The county went red. In 2008, a presidential year, 1.1 million people, almost double voted. The county went blue. Then we went back down to 800,000, right? Still high, but not quite. The county was purple. You were party chair there.
Yeah, you had to rub that one in, didn't you?
No. I'm just saying you were also the party chair in 2008. Right?
I was the party chair in 2008.
But in 2012, 1.2 million. We went blue. Went back down, 600,000. We went red. 2016, 1.3 million. We went blue. When there is an uptick of extremeness, it trends to the left.
Certainly in Harris County, that's undeniable.
Right. In this county, but then everything else, when you mix that stew up, when you talk about the smaller counties, and I keep looking at some of the trends as far as the state is concerned, you see all of the smaller counties that they clearly are red. And just kind of curiosity, I know you talk about the numbers and the volume.
They're all up.
That's what's going to be able to see what's going on here in terms of the numbers. Although we still have early on with about 4%, I think, voting. This is talking about the Senate race at this point. The latest I have at 4%.
And Tarrant County update, 50.2%, 49.1%. Cruz up in Tarrant County. And again, this is the largest conservative county in the state. So we're watching that very closely.
So those are the numbers now that I was talking about there with that 4% reporting. And so as we'll watch the state numbers and we'll see what happens with those smaller counties. So Daniel, as you get any other numbers that are updated, including the Harris County numbers, just put them up on the screen and we'll be able to talk about them and analyze them and look at them and give us our opinion about what we're going to have there. In the meantime, when we talk about the congressional seats, we talked about Culberson and Fletcher, Crenshaw and Litton and Olson. We haven't talked about the propositions at this point. Proposition B, there's two of them. Rebuild Houston is one of them. There wasn't a lot of energy around Rebuild Houston in the Prop A, although I did have Bill King on here. He was really much against Prop A. Proposition B, the pay parity one. You have any sense about what's going on with that? Because this is the latest. This is the numbers we have here now, the early numbers here, which really are in favor of the firefighters at this point, and that's. There are a lot of people who are against this for a lot of reasons. If this passes, it's going to be, I know that the mayor's already talked about where they're going to be doing some challenging in the courts. Is that even, what does that look like for the attorneys on the table?
You know, I don't know. I had thought that the against vote on B was more likely than the for vote on B. And obviously the early results are indicating the contrary of that rather decisively. I don't know what there is to litigate. Just because I'm a lawyer doesn't mean I can even understand those.
Oh, well, I count on you to do that. I count on you and Kevin here.
Did you read those things?
No, that was way too long.
It's impossible to understand. I think they ought to.
How I was voting.
I bet I can get agreement all the way around. I think on the ballot propositions, we ought to have a state law that says they can't be more than 25 words on the ballot.
I'm with you.
Yes, and I was part of a group that sued the mayor on the term limit ballot proposition. Right. It can be confusing the way they place those on the ballot.
Always.
It always is. For this one, I think people hear firefighters, and we want to do all that we can to support firefighters, obviously, first responders. So I think that the campaign, I'm not surprised that it's winning. I anticipated it was going to win just because people like firefighters. The question people had is, how is it going to be paid for? How is the city going to be able to do that? And I think that may be where they look to do some challenges on whether or not they can set positions and salaries like that by proposition. I'm not sure if that's going to be successful. I can just tell you that if this moves forward, you're going to have to figure out a way to fund it. And the city of Houston hasn't done a very good job with the money that they get now. So it'll be interesting to see how they take care of this one.
It's going to be an interesting challenge going forward if that holds up.
You know, the other thing, I'll bet it's not on your sheet, that perhaps we should address is
we'll put it on the sheet.
Court of Appeals races. So, pardon? Okay, so there are two. The Court of Appeals are the courts just above the courts in Harris County and below the Texas Supreme Court or Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. There are two such courts in Harris County, the 1st and the 14th. Each of them has 9 justices right now. 100% of those justices right now are Republicans. It turns out, for a lot of anomalous reasons, 10 of those positions are on the ballot today. Now, you have to vote on those.
From both the 1st and the 14th total?
Exactly. 5 out of each of them. That's a 10-county race. It includes Harris County, but also Galveston, Brazoria, Fort Bend, Waller, Washington County, and a few other, Grimes, a few other smaller counties. So there is a real possibility of the Democratic candidates winning all 10 of those races on the coattails of a strong straight party vote in Harris County with a big turnout in Harris County. If that happens, that is a sea change in the court system in this whole region, in this whole area, because now, instead of having exclusively Republicans on those 2 very important courts, you have majority controlled by the Democrats. And that's something that's altogether possible. I would not necessarily say likely because of the outlying counties, but if there's enough of a margin coming out of Harris County for Democratic judicial candidates, that's clearly within the realm of possibility.
And a lot of the appellate court judges, looking at the bar polls and things like that, attorneys have been somewhat happy with the appellate courts. There hasn't been an uproar for overturning the appellate courts. So if it happens, it's because of the straight ticket. People are going in there and they're not even paying attention to those races. They're just clicking all the way down. I haven't heard too many people really upset about.
Yeah, actually, there's another reason that's kind of interesting why it might happen, and that is because the Democratic candidates actually engaged in a coordinated campaign in the outlying counties. They actually spent real money. Something around $300,000.
And that's something they haven't done before.
Never done before. Never done before. Nor have the Republicans, by the way.
This may start a new trend then, if this is successful.
Depending on the
campaigns I saw was vote women, vote black, vote. Those were the ones I saw.
So they actually had block walking.
That's what they were doing.
They had more than that.
Yeah, I'm saying the ones that I saw. There were groups of black women that pushed campaigns, and they campaigned together.
I've seen
within
that.
So that actually was not. That actually was not a coordinated campaign. I think what Jerry is referring to is the actual coordinated campaign through the county parties in those areas. The Black Women's PAC is an organization that did promote the fact that there were 19 African American women running for judge here in Harris County.
Okay, we'll break you up just for a moment. Now, we have some reports of some of the people who are now declared winners, and Sylvia Garcia is one of those, I'm told, who has been retired. And of course, that was a big deal as she was, formerly a commissioner, then state senate, and now having gone to this particular place. And this is groundbreaking in terms of her being a woman, Hispanic woman, Congress. From here, and I understand that she's speaking now. We're trying to get that up, but if we get that up, young Daniel, let me know and we'll go to her speaking. But that was not really a shock in that particular district because of the way it was laid out and the way Jean Green had been controlling that district for so long. And I remember, here she is now. We'll take it.
And stand up to Donald Trump and fight for you. But I predict that the Democrats will take the Congress back.
Okay, we're having some challenges with that sound, obviously. But the first things out of her mouth was fighting Donald Trump and taking Congress back, and so the tone is already being set here, which is anti-Trump.
Us versus them. That's the message. That's the message they're taking.
And could this have started? Could this have started? Wait a minute. Go ahead. Could this have started with Little Marco and Lion Ted? Could that have been where this started?
That was against his own party.
No, I get that. No, I get that.
That was against his own party.
I get that. And because he was able to win with that style, those who were embracing him felt like they could use that same style.
Well, I would like to see if Democrats dislike the tone that Trump has, I would like to see them run and win with different tone.
Yeah.
They're using the exact same tone that they're accusing Trump of using. It's anger, it's name calling, it's running people out of restaurants because I can't eat because I happen to be a Republican. I mean, that's the anger that is out there on the other side, but yet they keep talking about Trump's tone. I haven't seen Republicans screaming at Democrats to get out of any restaurant. I haven't seen them mobs jobs. I have not seen mobs of Republicans going after Democrats at all.
You have never attended. Hold on, Jerry. They don't do that. I am trying to be contained and dignified, but I am appalled. Have you not watched just the last week alone the difference in tone and tenor when one president versus another, when one talks about unifying our country, when one is talking about and looking and reaching into the very fabric of the things that would divide us and turning up the volume on it, not boasting an economy that he should be talking about, that he inherited off the back of a good progressive president, but actually turning up, focusing on issues that would seek to divide us. No, they don't actually run people out of restaurants. They send bombs. They shoot people in the head in Kroger's and spew things that come from a tone that frankly Democrats did not create.
Because when Republicans
Democrats did not create.
Republicans got shot on a softball field, I didn't see Democrats coming out saying we need to tone it down.
I'm sorry, when what?
When Republicans got shot on a
softball field in Alexandria.
Got shot on a baseball field, I did not see Democrats saying, look, we need to tone this down. Our rhetoric needs to...
It wasn't just Republicans that got shot.
It was a Republican ball game.
What rhetoric?
You probably didn't hear about it because nobody reports when things like that happen to Republicans.
Wow.
So you probably didn't hear about it, but it happened.
Wow. What rhetoric are you talking about? Bernie Sanders never said any of the things
Bernie Sanders isn't even a Democrat, so we're talking about the Democrats, right?
Well, at least the caucus is right.
Now you want to claim him. I heard Hillary said he wasn't.
Hold on, just amazing.
Okay, did you not see the Lizzie Fletcher ads on TV? Talk about a negative campaign.
Did you see
hold on a second. I pride myself on being a hardcore independent. And so for that reason, I can see a little bit of all of this. I see what's happening on both sides. Tone and tenor from the White House, from the very top, that's where the tone is set in a lot of places. And I understand how you said that Democrats, when you're talking about people in restaurants and that sort of thing. But I also look at the last week from the rallies that were happening, and as an independent, looking at some of what's going on.
Let's look at her rallies.
But Maxine Waters does not have the bully pulpit.
Oh yes, she does.
And there's in terms of the national.
Yeah, she gets on the national news all the time.
We're going to redefine the bully pulpit.
No,
we're going to do that. We're going to take it from the president.
There's a reason why the president went to Twitter, because he said he can't get his message out on traditional TV and news anymore. So that's why he went to Twitter.
Is that why they wouldn't run his racist ad?
He led every newscast of every national network over the last week because he should have. He was busting his butt going to all of these places, and he knew that he was going to get the kind of coverage that he got. So I'm going to have to push back and say he got a lot of coverage, and he got a lot of coverage as a candidate because of who he was. The same people who gave him the platform to do what he did then became the fake media when they were doing something different. This is from me, and I look at what's going on here. And you talked about the fact that the economy that we have now, I would be pumping that up like crazy. I would be talking about that. But what was talking about is about
it just never gets covered on the media.
What he said was it's boring to talk about.
Yeah, he did.
Let's talk about the caravan of people that are coming to destroy the greatest nation in the world.
I have seen entire speeches, and he will talk about things that I love, and I will watch different stations that night, and the sound bites are never those.
Never those.
They are never those. They take the stuff that they know people are going to get fired up
Why
about.
don't you tell Fox News to start running some of those?
Well, they do. Fox News runs them.
Oh, no, he says they're not there.
Well, Fox News runs them in their entirety. Fox
they
News
went in their entirety. I watched the whole thing.
Oh, so what you said before was inaccurate.
Oh, no.
There are, in fact, TVs that are stations.
Okay,
but I tell you what, Jerry, Fox News wouldn't run his last ad, nor would any other major network.
Here's a point.
Why is that when we want to talk about tone and tenor? Why is it that the President of the United States and major networks refuse to run a political ad from the President of the United States because they deem it as being too racist and divisive? And that includes Fox News.
Well, look, Twitter.
That includes Fox.
I don't know.
But he wasn't out at a national stage with the TV cameras there telling crowds to go out and physically get violent with conservatives.
Oh, yes, he did.
No, he didn't.
He said, I would punch that guy if he would.
He said he would pay for the legal fees for anybody.
When he was a candidate.
When he was a candidate.
We're
talking about
different guy.
Elected officials.
Okay,
well, you didn't have to vote
Maxine Waters is a candidate.
I didn't vote.
She's an elected official. She's a sitting elected official.
Well, here's my point. If you run against him because you say you don't like the tone, I would just see you show me a different tone then. Don't adopt his tone and say, I'm running because I don't like his tone, but you're using his tone to win.
You have not heard me do that.
No, I have not. No, I have not.
Okay.
Democratic
I haven't even heard Dallas do it, but I can tell you there's some out there that are pretty big.
No, there aren't. Get him to tone it down and see what happens.
And frankly,
it's his job. He's the President of the United States. It's his job to set the tone. It's his job.
Okay, we knew what we were getting forgetting when we elected him. He is who he is.
We didn't elect him.
Yes, we did. The majority of Americans elected him.
No, that's not true. No, that's not true.
You want to get into this? He was elected fair and square by
nobody didn't say that. That is correct.
He was elected fair and square.
We would agree with that. We would agree with that.
I did not.
I would not agree with the majority of Americans.
I did not like Obama as president. But he was president. I respect the position. I respect the office. I would like to see the exact same thing. Whether you like Trump or not, he is the president of the United States. If you're an American, we are all American.
I respect him. And I respect him enough, but I respect him enough to vote against him and his party.
Well, why don't you hold some of the Democratic electeds accountable to the same standard?
I do.
Who?
Maxine Waters.
Okay, well, let's talk about
Maxine. What is it you'd like to say about Congresswoman Waters?
I think we need to bring that out because she has been made to be a trigger point for the Republicans.
By the president. So let's talk about Maxine.
No, not by the president. I
One member
watched her.
of Congress out of 435. Let's talk about Maxine.
You're only talking about one guy.
I'm talking about the president of the United States. Yes, one guy.
And she's no slouch in the Congress either.
That the Democrats are going to win the Congress.
No, they're keeping the Senate. They're keeping the Senate.
The House of Representatives.
I said the House.
No, apparently
projections are right now that they're going to take the House. She's going to be head of a committee. So do we want that person?
Is this a good time to point out that Beto O'Rourke is still winning, and there's more that's coming? Go ahead.
That's 7%.
It's not over yet.
7%.
No, we're still waiting on a couple of these small counties to come through.
More than a couple. More than a couple.
You got 50.
Now I'm scared for Cruz to win because you see how Democrats react when their candidate don't win and they're excited.
They incite violence.
When Hillary was 99.1,
do we incite violence?
She did. Wow. We all saw it. We all saw it.
I'm curious about this as well.
Violence.
So violence. What was it?
Democrats insult violence. Were Democrats
banned from
Pittsburgh?
It was in California, at one of her events in California.
Where there was violence?
No. She was telling people to go out.
You mean like Donald Trump does at his rallies?
Jerry.
No, he doesn't. I've been to his rallies.
Were Democrats asked not to come to Pittsburgh? Were Democrats asked not to come to Pittsburgh after people were killed in a synagogue?
Yeah, no. He's right. It's his show. He's in charge.
The point was that I think that what she was doing was asking people to go and protest and make people uncomfortable.
No, it was worse than that.
Okay.
If we could find the clip, I'd love to show.
Yeah, I'd love to see it.
If
Kevin Brady
that's the best
is a shock. He also is a winner. 74%.
They called the sit-ins at the civil rights movement uncomfortable.
Sheila Jackson Lee is also a winner.
That's right, because there's been no progress since then.
Congresswoman Jackson Lee has also been.
Maybe you have.
There were like 4 people, I think, running, 3 or 4 people running against her, which is kind of unusual for having that many people running against her. Brian Babin has won against Dana Steele. Brian, the dentist in that area in District 36, of course, Dana, a broadcaster, Hall of Fame broadcaster, trying to make inroads. But that district has been very red for a long time. That was an uphill battle to begin with. So those are the numbers of those folk who have already been declared winners. And Congresswoman Jackson Lee, with 75% of that vote there, winning that area. And there were 3 other people, including 2 independents, I think, who ran in that as well, which is kind of unusual. It seems to me for those, over the years, the numbers of people who've been running.
Actually, she always has at least 2 opponents, and frequently 3. It's always, a Republican and an independent, and sometimes a Green or a Libertarian or somebody else will pay their $5,000 or whatever it is to be on the ballot.
So, at the risk of losing control again, I want to bring up. I want to bring more race. No, you can't. Not for the moment.
Okay.
The problem with what's going on in our country, to me, has been the tremendous amount of discord and divisiveness and the inability for anybody to be able to come together and sit down and talk about what's common and what we can do as a group. Why is that? Why is it that we can't put aside the anger that we have about what's going on with the other party to say, I like some of what you're doing, let's do this, without bringing in all of the talking points that have been put out by both parties so that we never get anything done. And the polls that we see now coming out of this election indicate that voters think that they're not getting the job done. And they're not getting the job done because they're busy fighting. So what can we do at this table that can be able to start that process going? I don't expect it to happen, but I'm just saying, what is it out there that we can do to change the dynamic about what's going on in our communities in our country?
For me, and we're going to get more gridlock if we see the House and Senate different, but for me, acknowledging that not everybody just based on party is an evil, bad person. I mean, I know.
I acknowledge that not every Republican is an evil, bad person.
See, that's a start. That is a start. Just
friends that are Republicans.
Right. Just saying, hey, look, just because they're Democrat doesn't mean that we have to hate them or that they want to destroy our country or that I don't like that narrative. There are some very good people who I know that are Democrats we may disagree on how we want our country to get somewhere, but we both want our country to get somewhere. And I think acknowledging that used to be an okay thing, but it's not anymore, because when politicians acknowledge the other side, they get primaried and they get run out of office on both sides. I was shocked to see California not endorse Feinstein. The California Democratic Party thought Feinstein was not liberal enough and did not endorse her. And that's what you have when you start to see it on both sides of these primaries. You can no longer acknowledge that the other side may have a good idea. We may be able to go along with it. We may be able to get something done, and I would like to see that change.
I don't know that I have a solution to what I'm getting ready to articulate, but I do believe that there are two specific causes of that. One of them is the Citizens United decision, which allowed essentially unlimited funding to flow into campaigns, and that funding gets spent to turn up the heat on the debate, and I think that's toxic. And the second thing, interestingly enough, is redistricting. The way that redistricting happens without regard to pretty much anything other than the tribalism of how many Democrats and how many Republicans are going to win and not win, I think is the other toxic force out there, and that is such a difficult thing, because we're talking about whether particular representatives are going to get reelected or not. I mean, that's what redistricting is about. But those two factors, I believe, are the beginning point of what is driving the angst that you discussed. And notice I did not mention anything about the tone of the president. I talked about two other structural problems in the system.
Teresa?
Well, and I would suggest that if there was a way we could get our national news media as a whole to stop rewarding bad behavior. The sound bites that get on the news all the time are these nasty, horrible, awful things that people do. The more outrageous you are, the more airtime you get. The more airtime you get, the better your name recognition. The better your name recognition, the more likely you are to get elected and keep your job. If we started focusing instead on where things are working, where people are working together, and ignoring the bad behavior, then maybe it'd stop.
Can I suggest a refinement to that? I think there is some validity to that observation, but it is predominantly at the national level.
That's why I said the
national trust. Whereas I think that local coverage does not tend to be
it is
as
not
aggressive.
Nearly as bad, but
right.
Most people watch the national media, and that's why I went with that.
Well, so we need to have more local news.
It'd be more like Channel 2.
There you go.
I can tell you our local politicians aren't as angry, as not as the contests aren't as mean-spirited as some of the national.
Maybe until they get back to Washington D.C., and in which case they morph and they become
But they don't. This is a fundamental observation that I have on both sides of the aisle. Most of the people serving in Congress are well-meaning, well-intentioned, good folks who are there because they think they have ideas to make the country better. And that's true of the Republicans and it's true of the Democrats. But the nature of our political system has gotten to the point to where that can't be publicly acknowledged. And so we have to vilify one another. And that is regrettable.
I think the worst part is that both parties have, I believe this before you even ask the question, have been hijacked by the extremes. And I think even for me, I've experienced situations where because I may agree with one thing and not agree enough, where I'm not liberal enough, right? And so I think where people that understand that there are some commonalities that we do probably agree with, and there are some places that we disagree, and that's okay. And I do believe that once upon a time we were able to have those conversations because we had to have those conversations because there was this idea of check and balance in our government. And I think that's a healthy thing. I don't think that any one ideology, whatever that may be, should necessarily be in control, because it forces us to look at ourselves and it forces us to have a discourse. So I'm gonna be honest. Yes, I desperately want the House to go blue, because I want to force our government to think about all of us and not just those that are going to vote in their primary. And that has even eaten at the very fabric of a lot of people, not only in our federal government, but in our state government, as you begin to see turnover of long-serving members who are just like, I can't do this anymore because I'm having to leave my values and vote not my consciousness and not in the interest of my district, but vote with fear of having a primary opponent. And so we lose good policymakers because they can't deal with the fire of the political rhetoric. So I think it's essential for the people in the middle to come together and be okay with that and force out those entities in both parties that would not allow us to have meaningful dialogue.
Those are the ones who burn the hottest, aren't they?
Right.
The ones that are, you know, they come out and they become. I remember when Senator Cruz first ran against Lieutenant Governor Dewhurst. He ran to the right. He ran to the right of me, like boom, boom, and before you know it, he was able to win based upon that, because once. And it was still the case that once you won the primary, you won the state. The latest numbers in that race now show a little bit of difference, show that Senator Cruz is in front now by 1 percentage point, with that 11% reporting, the precincts up there reporting now at this point. So the number is trending a little bit more now in favor of Senator Cruz at this point, and we will continue to see the numbers come in. And you look at the state, if we look at the map, by the way, there's a link. Daniel, we can put that link up. There's a link to our website where you can actually go and look and see the state, and you can see how those counties are trending, if you will. Because we look at the state and you can see all the reds that's there, and then the few places where there are blues. And Teresa, you talked about the fact that the major population centers, there we go. Daniel put it up there. That's on our website as well. And we're looking at that in these areas. You can see where the trending is taking place. And we'll continue to see that throughout. And those are the state numbers that we're dealing with. And that's pretty much the one that we're focused on at this point as far as the state is concerned. We'll continue to go back and forth on that.
You know, I'm looking at the latest numbers out of Harris County. Beto is ahead 57-42 in Harris County. And by the way, we're talking about the straight party vote. The straight party vote is 53-46. That's, I mean, the Democrats have the advantage in straight party, but not as nearly as dramatic as I think your assumption from your initial
Well, a lot of
response
the judicial races, though, fall within a point or two in Harris County. So that makes a difference, especially some of the close judicial races in the county seats.
Betting that with Beto up 57-42 in Harris County, the Harris County judicial races are not going to be 1 or 2 points this time. I think you're more likely looking 54-46.
Which is disappointing, because there's some very good judges that, and we have that every 4 years now. A Democrat side and Republican side, that they get every 4 years. You're starting to get your sea legs as a judge. Some national issue comes along and wipes out all the judges one way or the other, which really
So
hurts.
I'm going to acknowledge that, by the way.
Which is why I can't wait for straight ticket voting to end.
It's not going to change it. In 2008, when I was the party chair in Harris County, after we had swept Harris County, including all of the judicial races, I wrote an editorial, an op-ed piece that was published in the Chronicle, in which I called for an end to elections of judges and for partisan election of judges. And it's precisely because there are good lawyers and good judges who are Republicans and who are Democrats, and we're losing that. Of course, if you got a county, it's got, what do we have? 82 judicial positions on the ballot. There's no way for people like me to know who's a good judge and who's a bad judge, let alone the.
Well, you know what? If you don't know the judge, I'd rather you didn't vote in that race.
And actually, that's exactly correct, which I don't think we should be voting for judges at all. I think we need to come up with a different system. I've suggested a couple as well. But it's precisely because the only indicator we have of a judge right now is whether you got an R or a D beside your name. That's some reflection of the values that you embrace. That's not good enough to know whether a particular individual, in my judgment, whether a particular individual should be sitting on in judgment on folks or not. So yeah,
we'll all have a lot of work to make sure we understand their qualifications.
There's an interesting
That's
race
impossible
that
with
we have
this
not
many
discussed,
people.
but I've been trying to bring to the table here that I'm surprised. So Michael McCall, District 10, is losing pretty handily out of the early vote, and this is a multi-county race, but the Democrat is up 62% to 35%. And this encompasses Austin, Bastrop, Colorado, Fayette, Harris, Lee, Travis, Waller, and Washington counties. All of the early vote is in, with the exception of the small counties of Waller and Fayette, and has McCall at unlike other incumbents, Republican incumbents, has him at a pretty strong deficit, and now you're just waiting on election day results. So the question becomes, does this trend of what's showing keep? And again, this is certainly not a race that was being watched to shift, but the Democrat is doing extremely well in this district at 61% to 35%.
Also rebuts my theory about big money, isn't it? Because McCall was, until the last term, the most wealthy member of the U.S. House.
I mean, and if you look at the races around him, I mean, his colleagues that are incumbents are handily sailing to re-election, and so one can only wonder what's going on in this particular race. I'm not saying it's going to end one way or the other, but that definitely caught my eye as to, and he has right now out of early voting 52,000 voters out of Harris County. So that definitely makes me wonder what is going on with that.
Who does? Who has 52,000? I have
54,000.
I have McCall in Harris County up 63.
So he's got 54, right. But overall, the Dem is right. You're looking at.
Harris County. I said Harris County.
Yeah. On the statewide, the Dem is at 61%.
Wow.
And he's at 35%.
Wow.
How many precincts are reporting in yours? Because I show he's only down by 2,000.
Are you looking at Harris County?
No, I'm looking at Secretary of State.
Right, I am as well. So it's still, again, it's still early in the race, but even comparable to the other races, it's just shocking that he's so behind.
But that's only 2,000 votes. That's all they're showing him down by.
Well, I'm looking. Did you click and look at?
I have refreshed it.
The county by county. Are you looking at the county by county?
No, I'm looking at total in Harris County. But total he's only down 2,000.
Total in Harris County.
Total and Harris.
Oh, and Harris County.
So actually, what I'm looking at has him down by about 30,000 votes. 73,000 to 42,000.
Oh, I've got 102,000 to 104,000. Look at the Secretary of State's website.
This is the site I'm on.
That's where he is. Maybe it's
refresh it.
It just shifted. So yeah, now he's down by 2,000.
So it's 49.5 to 48.6.
Right.
That's still a pretty tight race.
Yeah. Well, the point is, no one was going to be watching the McCall race.
That should have been
this was not one of the races we would be talking about.
No, and it's going to be interesting. I want to see what the latest numbers are, both at the numbers in the 22. With Olson and Kulkarni, to see what those numbers look like now. Also across the country, I've noticed that the governor of Kansas is now gone Democrat, and there was a Chris Kobach, the Secretary of State there was a lot going on with that.
Yeah, there was.
And now that's the case. But here locally, Pete Olson now, they're still at 4% there at that point. So there's not a lot that's happened there. Remember, for those who are just clicking on and may not have known what had happened here earlier, 9 polling sites were kept open in Harris County. And as a result of that, the results were held back until 8 o'clock. For all of Harris County. And so the numbers, we didn't start to see any numbers at all. And those numbers early on were from the early vote totals early on, the first numbers we got. And so everything normally when polls close at 7 o'clock, by about 8:30, 8:15, we start seeing the numbers coming in. And so we're just delayed by about that amount now for Harris County. And so that's the numbers that are going to be the ones that are most significant for us. In the meantime, for the latest for District 7 with Lizzie Fletcher with 52% and to 48% with that 10% number. We'll continue to watch these numbers coming in, but clearly as we went into this, the poll that I saw, which was just last week, had Lizzie Fletcher down by 1 point at that point. And so with the numbers now and the increase in the numbers on the day of, what kind of effect, Teresa, your take on things is that the Trump effect is a positive effect. The by and large, the national numbers that we're doing some exit polling on what they thought, and the numbers that were coming out, the disapproval numbers for the president were a lot higher than the approval numbers were across the board. I don't know what the latest numbers were now, but the Trump effect on everything that we're doing now, what do you think is going to happen with Congress if Congress turns blue? And the NBC numbers indicated that there was a 90% chance that that would happen. I think everybody's kind of seeing the House, not the Senate, but the House. How does that change the dynamic about how politics, the business of politics, gets done? Because we know right now the way the president, over the last day or so, pretty much conceded that there might be that happening. And I know that typically he would say that he worked to get the Senate, to make sure the Senate stayed in play. And the shot that he took at Paul Ryan last week kind of indicated early on, you need to watch and take care of the House. Now that there's not going to, I know what's going to happen. He's going to say, well, if he'd done a better job, we would have done it. What does that do to the stew that we're going to do, that we're going to have in terms of making laws in this country?
We're at gridlock. You have a House controlled by Democrats, you have a Senate controlled by Republicans. Nothing's going to move. So you're going to have 2 years of obstruction in the House, because you can't pass anything that will make President Trump look good, because it will help him in 2020. And I'm not saying this is a Democrat strategy. It's a party strategy by both, that if there's one that controls it.
It's a philosophical difference. That's a fair way to
But there has to be something that the parties agree on that you could pass.
Okay, there certainly are, and I'm not willing to concede that won't happen yet. My impression is, see, how do I phrase this? When President Trump had both the House and the Senate, then he was not willing to really follow through on his desire to make deals with the Democrats. You take a look, for example, the DACA deal is an example, and some other things as well. Now that in order to get something accomplished, he has to make a deal with the Democrats. I think it's altogether possible. What are you pointing at?
I'm pointing at the Ed Emmett,
Leaning Hidalgo.
Yeah, right. 49.
So I didn't mean to disrupt
you.
No.
My bottom line is, and I'll quickly finish this, it's altogether possible that President Trump may become more malleable in terms of dealing with Republicans, and the Democrats in return to that spirit. And I think he will find that he can make some deals with the Democrats if he does that.
Do you feel the same?
Like the DACA deal.
Do you feel the same way? Because he did try to get a DACA deal done. But do you feel the same thing is going to happen if the Democrats take over the House and the first thing they do is talk about impeachment, talk about investigations?
That will not happen. Are you sure? Yes.
I wouldn't be so
okay.
Yes.
If that happens, then what will you do? Because I want to see your social media statement.
But listen,
okay.
Very clear.
What will you do if it doesn't?
Let's be clear. This has been.
I will come out and say, if they go in there and they don't act like little kids, and they actually want to legislate, I will go on my social media and congratulate the Democrats, and you will see the heat I take. But I will do it.
Okay. How about if I do this right here and now? I'm calling on the Democrats, who now have control of the House of Representatives, apparently not to engage in impeachment efforts. We got to quit this criminalization of the process, and this whatever is a verb that goes with impeachment in the process. Impeachment will not help and should not be done. Now, did I satisfy you?
You did satisfy me.
And I'm going to follow up by saying I do not agree with Jerry. I think that there is an investigation going on of the White House, and there have been people indicted from the White House, and there have been accusations made against the White House, and I believe that Congress has an investigative power and a duty to seek out the information needed by the American people, and if indeed that finds that the president has committed no wrongdoing, then the president should be exonerated along with the White House.
Hold your thought. We've got Governor Greg Abbott coming out to speak.
I guess they forgot about Hillary Clinton.
I love you too.
No, we didn't.
I want to say thank you to my daughter Audrey for. Come on over here. Come on over here. I want to say thank you to my daughter Audrey for her introduction. She began on the campaign trail with me when she was just 2 years old. And I am now proud to have earned her vote this election that helped me get reelected. And I'm also thankful to my wife of 37 years, the fabulous First Lady of Texas, Cecilia, who also, as you know, is the first Hispanic First Lady in the history of the state of Texas. But most importantly, I want to say thank you to the people of Texas for re-electing me to be governor of the greatest state in the United States of America. Thank you for your trust. Know this, I will never stop fighting for you and your families as we continue to make Texas the premier state in America. Moments ago, I received a phone call from Sheriff Lupe Valdez sending on her congratulations about the victory, and I thanked her. But also, I told her what I want to tell all Texans, and that is whether or not you voted for me or against me or didn't vote at all, I'm going to go to work every single day working for everybody in this great state. Now, we all know that this past year has been filled with campaigns that have battled under different banners. It's been the red team versus the blue team. Well, now that elections are over and the people have spoken, it is time for all of us to unite under the best banner of them all, and that is the great flag of the Lone Star State, the Texas flag. Listen, the reality is all Texans share a common vision. We expect Texas to be exceptional, and we will make sure it remains exceptional. It's time for us to work toward that shared vision of a brighter future for Texas and put behind us the differences of the campaigns. As Texans, the bonds that we share transcend our differences. Listen, we all want safer communities. We all want more jobs. We all want better schools. And we all want to give our children lives worthy of the promise. These priorities are bigger than any political party because, first and foremost, we are Texans. Listen, Texas is the land of opportunity. I'm living proof that we live in a state where a young man's life can be broken in half and yet still rise up and be governor of this incredible state. As governor, I will continue to ensure that that very brand of opportunity will remain true for generations to come. Now, I want to thank so many people for their hard work in making tonight possible. I want to thank my brother Gary and his wife Denise. I know Gary is here somewhere. Gary is right over here. Gary Abbott. Gary is a 20-year veteran of the United States Navy. Thank you for your service to our country. He has helped me connect with other veterans across the state and emphasize the importance that we do more to help the men and women who've worn the uniform, because we understand one thing. We would not be participating in this democratic process if it were not for those who fought and died wearing the uniform of the mightiest military in the history of the world. I also want to thank members of my wife's family, many of whom are with us today. If you're part of my wife's family, mi familia, raise your hand and let's hear it. And as you all know, we need to give our special gratitude to the most famous mother-in-law in Texas. Now, thanks also to the best campaign in the history of Texas politics. and to the best field staff and volunteers I've ever seen in any election in Texas. You are part of the biggest get out the vote effort Texas has ever seen. I want to thank you for the countless hours that you spent, whether it was in the heat of the summer, the cold of winter, all that you did to knock on doors, make phone calls, and to connect with voters and make sure they got out to the polls. Your hard work paid off with tonight's victory, and tonight's victory belongs to you, the grassroots workers for the Abbott campaign this cycle. But most importantly, I want to thank my fellow Texans. During this past year, I've had the opportunity to visit with so many of you in every corner of the entire state of Texas. I've had the opportunity to shake your hand, to give you a hug, to look in your eye and talk about our shared vision for the future of this state. And I want you to know, I'm going to be returning to that Capitol a few blocks from where we are today, working every day for you, making sure we keep Texas the premier state in the greatest country in the history of the world. And then as we do so, may God bless us in our efforts, and may God forever bless the great state of Texas.
All right, we're watching Governor Abbott winning re-election. Not a shock here, watching his speech, thanking all of the folk who were a big part of what was going on there in terms of his being able to win. Obviously a big machine, if you will. We've been watching some of the national stories as well, the national environment, which certainly is a big impact. Mike Braun from the state of Indiana, Senate there, one of the people to help keep the Republicans in control of the Senate. NBC is projecting that Republicans will, of course, retain that, and NBC is also projecting that Ted Cruz is a winner in the state of Texas. Right now, of course, the latest numbers are about 51 to 48%, with about 5-6 million votes cast at this point. But currently, NBC News is projecting him as a winner, and we here at KPRC are joining in that and projecting him as the winner. So close race, but the numbers and the way that the numbers will line up for the smaller counties, the 254 counties that Beto O'Rourke talked about him having touched throughout. Clearly at this point, the trend of having state offices held since 1994 continues at this point. Not a shock, though, Jerry.
No, it's not a shock, but I will tell you this. It should be the canary in the coal mine for the Republicans that he's that close, because if you project ahead to a presidential election year of 2020 and you look at demographic changes in Texas and you look at the dynamics of what happens in a presidential election year, now I acknowledge we don't know who our candidate's going to be yet, and that could very well be a significant factor. But if Beto O'Rourke got within 2 points when Hillary Clinton couldn't get within 9 and Wendy Davis couldn't get within 20, that suggests that there will be a lot of national attention in Texas in 2020. You know, and I think that you're going to see. I mean, look, the Democrats are going to win New York. The Democrats are going to win California. If you can start with New York, California, and Texas in your column, there's not an electoral map you can draw that the Democrats lose. But if we're that close, then I think you can see a real effort by the Democrats.
I think until you win, that it's still a big leap to say California, New York, and Texas, especially. You know,
all I'm predicting is there will be a big play in Texas in 2020.
Well, there was a big
not necessarily that there'll be a win.
Because they thought the polls were looking like Hillary could flip Texas. But I think I look more at not the Cruz race, because we know Cruz has some problems within his own party. I'm a huge Cruz person. I love working with Cruz on some initiatives for school choice. but I know that there's some Republicans who dislike Cruz.
Because of the way he came out against
Trump. And then when he embraced Trump. So he made both sides mad. He made the anti-Trumpers mad, and he made the Trump people mad. And so I could see why he struggled with popularity. I look at things like Abbott, how much he has won by in this state, showing that they still dominate on the statewide level on some of these races. So popular candidate like Abbott, no problem in Texas. If you have a candidate that Republicans are upset with within their own party, I think you see a little bit of a
Remember, my prediction only was that nationally Texas will be attract a great deal of interest in 2020. I wasn't predicting who would win.
Well, I was reading though about that, and I was reading about that, and there were some Democrats upset, saying that here we are going. Putting money in places like Texas, and we're missing some of the Midwest. We're missing some states that we're ignoring that Trump picked up. And so maybe some of the focus will shift, I think, out of states like Texas, actually, and into those states that he picked up that they felt like he shouldn't
part
have.
Of that is the demographics. If you look at the demographics of what is one of 4 majority-minority states in the country, the demographics of Texas, if the electorate were moved to reflect the same, should essentially be a blue state based on the traditional populations that tend to vote Democratic. And so the only way you actually ever get there, and this is still the state of Lyndon B. Johnson and Ann Richards, who were Democratic statewide elected officials. So how do you get back to that place if you don't make the investments and create the infrastructure and do what essentially Beto O'Rourke has done to excite Texas Democrats?
And it takes, clearly up to this point, Democrats have been most excited about the potential for making that happen. They put a lot of money in. Hasn't happened yet. Right. But I see your point in that, you know, it trends a little bit more toward that purple, people talk about sometimes with snideness about the blue wave, which maybe is not a blue wave, but a blue ripple in some cases. But you look at that and you say, well, at some point, hey, this is not as comfortable a lead as we used to have.
I have never seen Democrats more fired up and mad at a person than they are at Trump.
Oh, that's
if
true.
you can't win Texas with them this mad, I just don't know.
Well, the history of the state, though, that's just a big leap to go, I think.
And from my perspective, I hope you retain that complacency.
Well, and the other.
No, I'm all fighting. Hey, I'm a person that believes that the Republican Party message is flawed. I would like to see the Republican Party totally rebuilt on messaging. I think the Democrats do a much better job of talking about what's important to people. So I would like to see the messaging changed in order for us to be a little more competitive, even in Harris County.
Really, I've always thought that the Republicans are much more disciplined in their messaging.
Well, when you say discipline, it's called boring. And so what you will see is Republicans will come out with charts and show you all these statistics of how this is happening, and Democrats will come out with a baby and say, look, they're trying to take food from the baby, and they want to see you see bad things happen. And that moves people. That moves people. You have to get better.
To see our different perspectives.
But let me just say this.
What I believe the Republican message.
No one person can build the party. And the truth of the matter is, I think that were there, because you talked about under Donald Trump, were there a stronger ticket, I think, across statewide, which would have meant more investment and more reason for people to come out than just Beto O'Rourke. I think as you can field candidates to do that, then you can begin to strengthen and move towards that.
Well, I'm going to help you out. I'm going to give you guys some free advice. It's going to be free. I know you charge for this.
He's an attorney, so,
and I'm an attorney, so
you know what they say, they get what you pay for. But go ahead.
I think the Democrats put statewide candidates that are too far to the left. I think if White would have run on the governor's side, I think you would have saw a much closer race, because I think some of his messaging was more, some of his points were in line with Republicans, and they would have been happy. Some of them that were upset with Abbott would actually vote for him. When you put a candidate like Lupe Valdez, who's so far to the left, I just don't think that Democrats will win in Texas, because even Democrats I know, they're not California Democrats, right? They're not. If you start talking about gun control, you're going to lose a lot of even Democrats here in Texas. So I think the Democrats come out with candidates that are popular on the left coast and right coast.
The reason that O'Rourke did so well is because he was so moderate and not progressive. That's an interesting.
No, the reason he did well is because he acted like he was a superstar and everybody followed. I'm okay with that, but he just didn't win. I think that to win those races, I think you have to have a candidate.
Okay,
I still believe.
Okay, what I pick up is that I don't know that he acted like a superstar, but he attracted the kind of attention that made people follow him in that way. That to get, you know, well, whether or not it was just a different kind of way to do it. We've got Phil Archer is
other
standing
networks
by.
to join in on calling this race. Until then, I still believe.
Phil Archer is in El Paso where the O'Rourke campaign is. Phil, what are you hearing from that end? I know we've got the national network, and our network is called Cruz as the winner. What are they hearing there?
Well, as you can see and hear, the party's still in full swing here. There's been no announcement about AP, NBC, CBS calling the race in favor of Cruz yet. So everybody still having a pretty good time. Now, we have talked to folks in the crowd, and we've informed them and told them what's coming to us now on the wires and from the networks. And basically the response we got back from the people we talked to was disappointment, of course, but the feeling that their candidate had fought a good fight, and in doing so may have actually changed politics in Texas in a way that will make it easier for Democratic candidates to compete now. Whether that's true or not still remains to be seen. And again, still no announcement or no information given to the crowd here, several thousand people, that their candidate is being called as a loser in this race. Khambrel?
All right, thank you, Phil. We've been talking about that here as well on what kind of dynamic that's going to be going forward as a result of the changes. I also know I saw where Pete Sessions was defeated,
exactly,
which I thought was he's been around for a while. He's kind of been
Alan Allred, yeah.
And so that's another one of those changes. NBC News has projected that, and not a surprise from what our conversation has been here throughout the evening, that the Senate will remain in control of the Republican Party, and that the House, the NBC is projecting that the House will be changing to Democrats. So what does that do in terms of now all the parties? You were talking earlier, and I cut you off because we had to go to talk to somebody, but I wanted to let you finish your point because you disagree with Jerry about the impeachment point, and that you felt that. I don't want to get you fired up. I'm concerned about your blood pressure.
Then I get fired up.
I'm concerned about your blood pressure.
What you do to Trump? That's what the Democrats want to do too. No. But what I think is that there is a process that's happening, and to this point, it has been a process that has left some questions in the minds of the American people. Fine, maybe not you all, right? I have questions, other people have questions, and I think if there's nothing to hide, there's no reason to ask questions. I think the Congress, part of its power and its responsibilities is to investigate things, just like there's a special investigation going on with Robert Mueller, just like there have been people in the Trump White House that have been indicted.
Let me clarify my comments. I did not say there should not be investigations. I think there should be active investigations of all kinds of things that the administration is doing. What I said was, and what I sincerely believe is, that we should not be going directly, we shouldn't be going to impeachment until there is substantial evidence that the president has committed an impeachable offense. You shouldn't even investigate impeachment until you have substantial evidence that there is an impeachable offense. And I haven't seen evidence of an impeachable offense at this point. Now, something surfaces, you know, different story, but we should not, you know, we shouldn't be saying, aha, now that we've got the Congress, we should start impeachment proceedings.
Well,
that we should.
And I don't think so either.
I would like for them to start out with saying these are things that we think we can work with the president on. These are the issues.
I agree.
And we would like to start moving towards working on those. If they said that the minute they take over the House.
Okay, so how about DACA as a start? How about DACA as a start there?
DACA is a start, and I think Trump has already said over and over, I would like us to get something done on DACA. So he's already signaled, let's do something. Yeah. And if we can, I think that would be a great part.
Well,
infrastructure.
If all you have to say to show agreement is, I think we ought to do something on DACA, the Democrats have said, I think we ought to do something on DACA.
But we're not going to agree on everything on DACA. Correct. But what can we come up with to at least to get the steps starting to move?
I actually thought they had an agreement.
And I think to Khambrel's point, there needs to be more conversation about this that starts with what can we work on together, right? As opposed to this.
What investigation can we start this week?
Right.
That is the biggest distraction week after week after week, and we get nothing done.
I think that there is a legitimate opportunity for us to do something, and at the end of the day, you may not agree. Look, Here's what I will tell you: with a Democratic House, we are not going to repeal the Affordable Care Act. It's not going to be repealed. So I think what we ought to do is to sit down and see if we can come up with some things which will at least make it better, address some of the systemic problems in the Affordable Care Act. And I do think that the White House and the Democrats can work together on that.
The way that Republicans were claiming to want pre-existing conditions to be in play, I think we could probably work on making sure that at least that part stays in play.
They did say they were okay with pre-existing.
A lot of them, because up until the last month of this past election, I didn't hear that as much. So I thought that was interesting.
But you didn't hear that they wanted to get rid of it either. That was a construct of the other side.
They were throwing out the baby with the bathwater.
Well, they wanted to scrap everything and start over. Right.
Exactly.
They wanted to start because they said a lot of this. The problem is that bill is so big that when you think you remove one part, it actually was connected to several other parts and the whole thing. So that's why they were like, it's easier for us to just do a whole.
But you said, can we work together on stuff? And I think we've identified at least 2 places that we could sit down and work.
Across the state, health insurance being sold, removing those restrictions, I think would be a tremendous start.
So we should take this tape of this and just send it to the folk in D.C. and let them go ahead and work off of this.
They could just let us start the stuff, and then they just go ahead.
Put the 2 of us, or maybe the 4 of us in a room, lock us up there for 7 days, and we'll come out.
I don't know if y'all want to send me.
Yeah, we do. Hey, I'm looking at some things that are happening here locally, too. We went earlier. We talked about Proposition B and how the latest numbers that we had looked like that Proposition B was going to pass, which means that if it does pass, and it looks like it is going to pass, then right now, if you look at this number here, I can't see the percentage reporting, but 58 to 42% looks like it's where it was the last time. But if those numbers hold true, then it's going to be a very interesting process to see what happens, because the mayor has made it very clear that there are going to be jobs that are going to be lost, that there are going to be cutbacks happening if this happens. Now, I don't know what it means for how long the process can go before those pay raises have to be implemented, because the voters have, quote, spoken. The question then becomes, how far do you go to
Khambrel,
change what the voters have said?
I will remind you that the only election of any significance next year is an election for mayor in the city of Houston. I think that will impact the answer to your inquiry. I think that if 58% of the voters in Harris County have said this is what we want, the mayor is going to have a very difficult time saying, oh, no, we're not going to do that at all. I think that there will have to be some sitting down and dealing with that. I would also point out, I started out by saying that the Democrats were going to win all of the judicial positions, and it's looking like not only are they going to win all of the judicial positions, but they're going to win all of them so handily it's going to be over 100,000 vote on average, over 100,000 vote difference.
And including judge? Harris County judge?
No. Well, no. I'm talking about district courts, county criminal courts, and all of those kinds of things. Well, if that happens, what that means is that all of the judges in Harris County are incumbent Democrats, and that will have a significant impact on elections going forward for a significant period of time.
Can I just add really quick? Now, the county judge race is different, and the polling suggested that Ed Emmett was probably the only countywide Republican that had the ability to have that crossover appeal.
Right.
In addition to those judges, Jerry, the margin is wide enough to where the district clerk is going to change, the county clerk is going to change, the county treasurer is also going to change. So these administrative positions are also going to now become solely ran by Democrats, joining a Democratic county attorney, a Democratic district attorney. Am I missing anybody? No, that's about it.
Yeah. The tax assessor collector
and
voter
Democratic tax assessor collector.
So Orlando Sanchez, who has been the treasurer for
called Beacons.
Yep. He is.
That was so unkind. so unkind, Jerry.
We're not.
He is about 7 points. He's about 7 points behind political newcomer Dylan Osborne.
I know they're not
all straight. That's all straight ticket stuff.
Well, I know they're not happy about the results in Harris County because they said we need, conflict between the parties. We need parity. We don't need one party controlling everything. Because that's what they said about D.C. just a few minutes ago, that we need Democrats to control, because we can't just, there's no check in Harris County. So I know you guys are unhappy if Democrats run everything. Don't we need that checks and balance that you were talking about at the federal level, even here at the county level?
It looks like the Commissioner Court it's the
Commissioner Court doesn't control.
Commissioner Court has
any of
nothing to do with the
judicial. It doesn't control.
Well, it does.
But it controls a lot.
Well, it controls budgeting.
It controls a lot.
It controls budgeting. It controls jails. It controls public defender. It controls a whole lot of the criminal justice.
By the way,
tell you what, Trajan.
And the bail lawsuit.
That's exactly what I was going to get to. The public offender that reminded me about what's going on with the bail lawsuit and how that's going to be manifested going forward. What's your thought?
Going forward, the bail lawsuit is going to be resolved probably before everybody gets sworn in, and it's going to be resolved by basically doing what the plaintiffs have asked to be done in that lawsuit. PR bonds and getting rid of this litigation to try to keep money bonds is a way to keep in jail indigent defendants so you can force them to cop pleas.
What does this do? What does the Harris County Republican Party do at this point, based upon what's happened here now? Because I know that this is if it holds up like it looks like it's going to hold, that's a steamrolling that you have really no control over.
But we've been through this before.
Yeah, and what was the process?
2008.
Kinda, sorta.
Yeah, you remember?
Yeah.
Yeah. We lost every judicial race on the ballot then too, and it was another straight
county chair in 2008. However,
but not on the governor's cycle. I think only on the presidential cycle.
And you also had Democrats that lost. That we had about 5 Democrats.
Oh yeah,
it wasn't.
And we lost the DA's race. That's right. And we lost the DA's race.
This to me is bad. You have back-to-back elections where you see a total wipeout, and that to me tells me that business as usual for our party can't go on that way. We can't rely on governor's coattails and just sweeping Harris County Republicans into office. We have to look at whether or not we need to change our messaging, whether or not we need to do something different in order to touch people who are not following the Republican Party.
And you know, the Republican Party in Harris County is not monolithic. You do have 2 pretty identifiable groups that frequently have been somewhat bad at war with each other. So
we don't fight. What are you talking about?
For those who may not know, which
I think in the spirit of what we were talking about before, I'm not going to point those fingers. I'm just going to say, and I think y'all are going to agree with me that
there are some disagreements within the party that splits the party.
And I think this is going to make it even more difficult for the Republican Party to come back together.
I would say to you, I know exactly who you're talking about, but that's only an issue during primaries. We're past the primaries, we're at the general. So there is no issue at the general elections. This is strictly a matter of straight party voting. And once that is gone.
Okay, so I know you're the Republican, but I also know that there has been disagreement as to how you should run your campaigns, whether you should put for example, an emphasis on messaging or an emphasis on field operation. And there are 2 different factions that have their own special interests behind each of those 2. But again, without naming names, there are at least 2 distinct factions in the Harris County Republican Party. By the way, there are factions in the Democratic Party.
That's what I was going to say.
I'm not denying that. What I'm saying is that when you have this back-to-back to potentially back defeats, that's going to put more strain on the party trying to get its act together in some kind of unified
what it's doing
way.
isn't working.
Look, fighting is okay when you're winning. So when the Republicans
were harder time raising money too.
Right, but when Republicans were winning all the seats, all I heard about was Democrat infighting on the other side. Oh, they can't get it together. Oh, look how great we are! We're winning, we're winning, we're winning.
Oh, that was right.
And the exact same thing happens when you start losing. People start pointing fingers, and people are going to start saying, "Hey, look, we got a lot of fighting going on. We need to fix it." I agree. I think the party is splintered in Harris County. If this is not a wake-up call for us to look at how we get back together and continue to move forward and fight in Harris County, we're going to end up losing.
So it's a year away, but I think you can look at the.
I think let's not beat yourselves up too much, right? Because the demographics have changed, but I also heard my good friend across the table talk about the Trump effect, and it's sweeping, and so we can only assume that there had to be some Trump effect in this 10-point spread that's happening here in Harris County.
Even the Trump effect for for the party in Harris County, not everybody embraced Trump, so you had a split even there. You had some of the party saying, no, we need to distance ourselves from Trump, and some that said we need to embrace Trump. So even then, you don't have a clear message on.
But let me say this to you, and Jerry's can talk way more about this as a long-time stalwart in our party. But we've seen this go back and forth. We've never seen these judicial seats go one way or the other by this margin. That's not just a function, that is not just an all of a sudden dysfunctioning party that has been the dominant functioning party in this county.
I agree. I think Harris County has a lot of anger towards Trump, and it drove out the voters. It really did.
You say. We can go on.
Yeah,
I disagree with that.
It drove. Well, the numbers show that it's driving the party. My question is whether or not we're doing a bad job of pushing Republicans out who support Trump and who support what he's doing, and whether or not we're getting them to the polls, because there's still Republican voters that are sitting at home. So my concern is, are we reaching them? Are we not getting their message out and getting them to the polls?
Isn't that something both parties have to think about on a regular basis, on making sure they get out those people who you really depend upon? And that's part of what was behind, it seems to me, the president's efforts over the last week or so to get the base out. Yes. Whether he was in this state or some other state, the images of him saying what he was saying, where he was saying them, was designed to get the base out.
Yeah,
and it was.
But,
go ahead, I'm sorry, Teresa.
No, well, I was going to say we have. The Republican Party has its base, the Democrats have their base. They show up and vote every time, regardless. You don't have to do anything to get those people out.
Which
it's the rest of the folks.
Your hardcore
your base. Your hardcore base.
Oh, on both parties.
On both parties. You don't have to work to get them to come out. They come out every single time. And if you look at the 4 out of 4 voters, it's there every single time. It's the ones who don't show up every time. And we don't necessarily know who all those people are. And I think part of the Republican Party's problem in Texas in general is we've been a red state for basically almost 50 years, by and large, a red state. We've gotten fat and happy and complacent. And we need to retool and rethink how we're getting our message to our voters, especially the ones that are not our hardcore base, because they're there, and I still think there's a lot more of them there.
Well, so what I was,
and we have to ask ourselves whether or not we're spending more time in our party fighting each other than we are looking.
You gave me some free advice. I'm going to give you some free observation advice. Where you're going to find a difficult time after 2016 and 2018 is recruiting quality candidates in Harris County. That's going to be more difficult now that after what we've been through in those 2 election cycles.
I want to. We've got about 15 minutes left on our little get together here, and we've got so many more verses of Kumbaya to sing. I don't want to cut us off, but I do want to go and look at the numbers that we can. So, young Daniel, the magnificent producer, let's pull up the numbers that we have, and let's go through the numbers we have within our system here and look at them. Because I know I'm looking at the Lizzie Fletcher numbers, for example, and she's still leading by 4 percentage points, the last ones I've had. So I want to bring people up to date on where we are with the numbers that we have. And you can punch them up, and we'll talk about them as we go. And then on the backside of that, we'll be able to go ahead and continue. Here's the one we're talking about, Lizzie Fletcher Culberson, and you got to be concerned at this point. I don't know what you know about how this breaks down, but 4 points at this point, I don't know, depending on where the other numbers are coming from, unless you can see where the precincts are.
I'm calling the race going towards Lizzie Fletcher.
I don't see that you cannot come to that conclusion at this point in time. Networks haven't called it yet.
Right.
It's altogether possible that there could be some particular boxes that they're curious about. But you know, at this time of the evening, a woman in that district, 52-48. I think that Culberson's must be not very comfortable.
Right. And Crenshaw number, I'm sorry, Teresa, you're going to say something?
No, I was just going to say it's only 52% of the precincts voting, so it's still close enough. I wouldn't call that race yet.
Right. So House...
no, and I'm not calling the race. I'm saying this is how I see it's going.
Yeah.
It's going to go, because I don't see any reason for these trends.
And I disagree with you on what you're seeing there. The early vote in Harris County is going to end up being 60% of the total vote. That vote's in. The mail-in ballot's going to be 10%. What we're talking about is the fight over the last, what's the math?
30%.
30%.
And that would be the ones who voted today.
The ones who voted today, and I don't think that there's enough who voted today that can change 4 points this late in the evening.
Well,
because some of those votes are already in the
That's why we are excited to be here until midnight, no matter what. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, House of Representatives, District 2, Dan Crenshaw over Todd Linton, and it looks like that he's a comfortable lead at this point.
Yeah, he does.
And there's no reason to think that that might change with what we have going on here. Here's a change here. We're looking at the Michael McCall numbers here, 50 to 48% now, but that reporting number is still rather small at this point, but it looks like, you know, what you would expect with him being the incumbent and being in all the positions he's been in. I mean, he's chair of the Homeland Security. He's a pretty big fish in Congress, although with the change in Congress, he's going to be rich. He's very rich, yes. With the change in Congress, he'll become the ranking member, I guess is what they call it, in the Homeland Security.
But do you know whether that was, yeah, okay, I think this answers it, whether that was statewide or whether that was just Harris County?
Right. So this is 22. If Pete Olson still with a sizable lead at this point over Shreve Preston Kulkarni.
So, you know, something interesting about this race I was looking at, there's still quite a bit out. 22. Yeah. There's still quite a bit out on this. And so, you know, it's really about what the turnout was versus Fort Bend County, versus Brazoria, and what and how he continues to trend in Harris.
Right.
You know, and I think that's probably why this race has not been called yet, because it's still a lot out with those other counties.
Here's Jim Murphy, 58 to 42%. He was the subject of a couple of investigative reports by our investigative unit.
Shows you how effective they are.
Yeah, I know. Pretty handily in control in there, 58 to 42%. Well, it depends on what kind of tracking you get. Sarah Davis, Allison Sawyer. Sarah Davis with a 2-point margin at this point. Still not very many. The number of reporting is still only 10% in that regard, but obviously that district is fairly moderate and concerned the rest of the state here. This is still very interesting here, though. Ed Emmett and Lena Hidalgo with that 49%, an absolute tie with 46% of the votes there, at least according to our latest numbers here. Jack Mormon 2 points up on Adrian Garcia.
15% reporting.
15% reporting, so that's not very many. So you're thinking that depending on what, it's hard to say, but it's going to be a long night for a lot of people who are running right now.
Yeah.
Looking at some of these numbers here, and the Prop A, the drainage fund, that was not really, not a big deal there. Not a lot of people were against that. Had the mayor on Newsmakers, and he was saying nobody really has any concerns about that, or really not that many. But now this Proposition B, the firefighter parity, 58 to 42%. You know, that just deepens the schism between the fire department and the mayor, which once upon a time the firefighters were out campaigning for the mayor, and now, of course, it is not that way. And so we look at the District 14 now here. Randy Weber, handily over Adrian Bell, continuing to be in control there, and that district has been in Republican hands for a while. It's one of those many districts that's kind of been changed around to kind of fit the needs of the party. I remember when your good buddy Tom DeLay was really shrewd in the way he masterminded the state to change the districts. That really, it was a stroke of genius, and actually it was part of the game plan.
Oh, come on now.
It was.
I know.
I know.
Genius. You got in a little bit of trouble.
I know. I knew I was going to poke you.
Political genius.
I know I was going to poke you there a little bit here. But you know what happened, of course, Jerry? I'm sorry, but the rest of the country took that same template and put it into play.
Yes, they did.
And so they took when they started winning the governor's houses, and they started doing the gerrymandering, which you are very attuned to, the gerrymandering and what kind of changes it's made and how it's challenged.
After it.
Huh? Yeah.
By the way, you were talking about 15% or whatever. In the county judge race right now, Ed Emmett has about a 4,000 vote margin, a lead of about 4,000 votes. And I think very much close to all of the votes are in. The reason I say that is he's got 490,000. Lena's got 486,000. That's 900 and something thousand. We're going to end up in Harris County with 1,000,003. So I mean, there's not that many more votes to count.
If we end up at 1.3, there's a possibility that Lena will win this race.
Correct.
If we end about 1.1, 1.2,
then he
perhaps not so much.
So as we're talking about this, NBC News is reporting that as they are on the cusp of seeing the Democrats win the House, that Democrats are talking about requesting Trump tax returns.
Breaking news.
That I think will happen.
Jerry, I don't think they heard you.
But there you go. That's what I mean. The first thing they're talking about once they
throw
win
another distraction out there. Let's not cover.
Oh, you said impeachment. And I said impeachment is a bad process.
But what I said was
it's a distraction, and you know it. That's all this is.
I would like to see them actually. I would actually like to see them
to make the president do what he promised repeatedly to do.
But he's not required to do it, so why is that going to be an issue? Isn't it a better issue to get working on DACA? Isn't it a better issue to get working on?
You are right. It is.
So why are we going to talk? Why are we going to waste all that time asking for something he doesn't want to do?
The answer is the president repeatedly said he would do it, so he lied about that. Yeah, he doesn't have to.
His lawyers told him not to do it.
No, that's not true. Number two.
Why do you guys care about this?
Yeah, why do you care?
There's kids that are going to go to bed who need food.
There are people who are fighting.
Oh, they are
have a direct insight into his decision-making process.
They are going not to.
If that's your most important thing when you take office is to see some tax returns, then I can tell you right now we're hitting gridlock and nothing will get taken care of. There are kids who need food. There are infrastructure in this country. Our military is stretched thin. There are so many issues, and right now,
and we're going to
our military is stretched thin while we're sending thousands of troops to the border.
Give them the tax returns so they can.
You're talking about kids that need food. We didn't care about this before Democrats took over the House.
Republicans,
because that's straight up what your president is talking about.
Wait a second. So, number one, it didn't say that that was a number one priority. It was just one of the things.
First thing that pops up, though.
No, that just you can't. It wasn't a priority thing. It's just another way. The other thing is, I kind of like when my president tells me something that he's telling me the truth.
But you don't need Congress to force him to do it.
No.
We shouldn't have to.
This has nothing to do with the tax returns.
Presidents lie. I hate to tell you this.
This has nothing to do with tax returns. This has
apparently this one does it a lot.
Obama said we'll keep.
Wait a minute.
We're going back. We need to pull him back before Congress and find out why he lied.
We're going backwards. He said a magic word. He said infrastructure. The I word. That's the good I word. I thought a duck was going to fall down out of the sky and give you $100. Whatever happened?
People out there are too young to
know where I'm starting. Groucho Marx.
I know what it is. I'm old enough to know.
You are indeed.
You didn't mean it the way it sounded, I'm sure.
I think we're close to the
But
same
whatever
age,
happened to infrastructure?
It did not get done.
There's something else we can do with the Democrats.
Because we were too busy creating more investigations.
Wait a minute, you're going to fault. I'm going to hear something else we can do together.
Infrastructure is something that the party should be able to work on. It benefits the country. They need to get together and get it done. I'd like to see people that are taking office right now talk about those things. Yeah. If you're talking about anything other than those, I'm unhappy. Because of the other stuff,
I can probably come up with 2 or 3 more.
Do it in committee. Yeah, do your tax return. Do all that stuff in committees if you want to. But I want to see people right now who are taking over the House say, we're going to lead, we're going to govern, and we're going to do these things.
So Trump is talking about a new tax bill. If he's talking about a new tax bill, I do believe his tax returns are germane to showing how that bill that he's pushing personally affect him.
Every single person in Congress has to show
right, and every president that's ever voted on that we've never done.
Yeah, we certainly have.
It's happened. It's been a tradition. You're right. It's not a law.
It's not a law.
But you know.
And frankly, I don't care what's on his tax return.
I do.
I don't.
See, I
care about whether or not he's making sure I get to keep more of my tax dollars. I'm not concerned about it.
There's a difference between the Republicans and Democrats.
Well, Democrats never cared about seeing it until it was Trump, and they think they're going to catch him in something. Other than that, nobody's ever cried about tax return. Presidents were putting them online, and I guarantee most of them have never looked at presidential returns online when they placed them. Well, maybe I'm wrong. Have you looked at previous presidents?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I have, but I have to confess that I was an accountant before I was a CPA.
Well,
that's like an athlete looking at the box scores. That's not fair. That's different.
Well, you asked me, was I to lie to you?
In the grand scheme of things, who cares if the new proposed tax cuts help him, as long as they help Americans?
Because it shows us what the motivation.
But he doesn't. He doesn't put the bill together. Yeah. Congress puts the bill together. So are you looking at every congressional person and seeing where there's benefit them? Because I can tell you it does.
Okay. All right.
It does.
I think we digress. I mean, yes. I mean, Congress puts the bill together. We also know they work with the White House when they passed this tax cut for the wealthy this last time.
For the wealthy.
For the wealthy.
You're going to tell me that the Congress
didn't. Everybody.
Well, considering half the country doesn't pay tax, it's hard to pass a tax cut that doesn't benefit people who pay tax.
Let me cut through that. The ones who benefit the most from the tax bill were the ones who
pay the most taxes,
who are the richest.
You can't get around that.
That's just the way it works out.
Right.
I know. See, but everybody gets in these semantics. It's semantics. Yeah. It's true that the people who are making the most money are the ones who benefit the most because they pay the most taxes. That's true.
And that bill actually, I'm going to tell you what was great about that bill actually was cutting corporate rates, and that increases job production. No one talks about that.
Democrats were in favor of that, but they wanted a 25% instead of a 21% corporate tax rate, so it wouldn't hit such a big hole in the deficit. And I don't understand why all of a sudden trillion-dollar deficits are okay with Republicans.
They are not.
Well, but that's the impact of the tax bill.
They're not. But you know what? Every president has done, and now every administration has done. What I'm saying is, everyone says they're gonna fix the problem, and each time we get a group in there,
guess what? Obama did cut the debt in half.
Obama didn't cut anything. Congress did, and it was forced on him. Right. Those cuts were forced on him.
And I'm looking back. I don't mean to look back. We're looking forward.
He talked against it the whole time.
So the latest numbers, 3% lead now for Lizzie Fletcher over John Culberson with 52% voting. So this says 4. It's a 51.7 I've got instead of 52, but you get the picture. It's 52%. Daniel, tell me again, how much longer do we have here? A couple of minutes? 5 minutes. Okay, so as we're looking at the numbers that are coming in now, it's clear that there is going to be a change in the House in favor of Democrats. And now as we look forward to our time here where we have almost sung Kumbaya, we've come up with some things that could be positive to see how we can make this work. Are you optimistic that we can get anything done, or are you thinking that it is going to be logjam?
Nothing will get done. Very disappointing. But the way politics are trending, nothing's going to get done. Everybody's going to be focused on 2020. You have too many people in the Senate who are looking to become president. Everybody's focused on 2020. Nothing's going to get accomplished.
I don't know whether things are going to get accomplished or not, but I do believe that there are more prospects of the Democrats and the president, the administration, coming to some agreement now that the Democrats have control of the House of Representatives, assuming that comes to fruition. I don't think you're going to be looking at the big, huge kinds of things, whatever those may be, but I do think we can expect to see a deal on DACA, probably an infrastructure bill, perhaps some of the other health care fixes that we've talked about earlier. I do think that the Democrats and the Republicans, the Democrats want to work with the administration. And to be honest with you, I think the president is pliable enough to want to work with the Democrats.
Biggest surprise for you locally here tonight?
Well, really the biggest surprise for me is the margin in which all of the down ballot races are looking right now. I mean, we're only at about 51% reporting, but these are wide margins, and I expected it to be a bit closer than it was. But this is a mandate.
Now, in terms of Congress, the Fletcher-Culberson race seems to be the closest one. Mm-hmm. This is your district,
It's my
correct?
district. Mm-hmm.
The biggest surprise for you, I mean, is this a big surprise for you, or did you kind of sense that there's a possibility?
No, I really didn't sense it as a possibility up until the nasty campaign ads I started seeing flying in the last 2 weeks. Those are very impactful, and I didn't like seeing them because I personally knew that some of the things that were being said were not true. And I know it's all the PACs. It's not the candidates, it's the PACs. Yeah, yeah. And I hate those PACs. Somebody needs to be accountable for the stuff that goes out there.
You acknowledge that there were some nasty campaigns on both sides.
Yeah, but hers were the worst. And it was the PACs, not the candidate. But so, and I'm in that district working it all the time. It does surprise me. I thought she'd get a good number of votes. I didn't think she'd win, because he's got a good, strong base, and he's worked really hard for the district. Right. He's also not very good about telling his constituents what he's doing all the time. He needed to get better at that. That was his problem, but that does surprise me. I'm going to be really unhappy if I wake up tomorrow morning and that number holds.
But I think he made some, I think there was some things that kind of stuck and really hit home for people. I think, you know, they really painted him, and I'm not in that district, so I'm not, you know, obviously I'd like Lizzie to win, but, you know, they painted him as being out of touch with the district on a number of issues. And I think, to your point, you know, I think the commercials, I mean, I was sitting there watching them, and we mentioned this the first hour, I was sitting there watching them like, wow. Yeah. Like, this is, from both sides, though, I'm like, this is some good stuff, out of the world. All of it. You know?
I hated that one, but that was so cheesy and so bad. Too. But if we could do nothing else but make someone accountable for those PAC ads that come out, I dislike the way our system has devolved and allowed that kind of advertising to happen, and then the candidate has no responsibility for it whatsoever, and that is just wrong to me.
One of the last things I want to say, Daniel, what's the latest on Judge Emmett and the county vote? We've got less than a minute here. I want to see if we can get that information, but I want to thank Teresa Kosmowski for being here tonight. Thank you for adding the beauty to this set, because otherwise it would be pretty dismal.
Thank you for having me.
Old man, you invite us here, then you insult us.
Yes, who does that? Good to see you as always again. Jerry, I love you. There's nothing you can do about it. Dallas, thank you. It's still 49-49 there. You can go to click the KPRC Channel 2 with our coverage coming up at 10 o'clock as well. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We'll see you next election time. Thank you again.
Hey, y'all want to know what we didn't discuss, which is interesting? It looks like Missouri City may be getting a new mayor.